half freezes the road at best.
Yeah. I know, that's how our road is right now.
Yep.
I don't know how we get
And then,
I don't either. My contractor said, I almost got stuck in there
No.
Wednesday. He
John
said,
and
I
Judy
didn't have
Sherman?
my plow on, but all my plow gear
Yeah, I know them.
get caught in that mud. So he did drive down, this has been yesterday morning when it was frozen. He said, I drove down and
Relax.
Well, my section was almost up 3
Okay.
It's not 6 o'clock. Oh, it is by that. Okay, yeah.
Okay, I'm calling to order a select board meeting. It's an emergency select board meeting for Tuesday, March 25th, 2025, 6 p.m. here in the Opera House. We're going to do this emergency select board meeting and take care of the business here, and then we'll move on to our next meeting. Any amendments, and this is just involves the select board, any amendments to the agenda? None. The action item tonight is to act on the nomination period for MSAD 28 five-town CSD school board representative for a one-year term. John, do you want to?
Yeah, so in short, what has happened is there was a nomination open for a one-year term on the school board that were part of the raft of all the rest of the nominations that, 3-year terms, 3 terms. And in reviewing the resignation from that individual, it seems it wasn't specific as to when their term would end. And so Liz was in consultation with our town attorney, and basically the short of that conversation is that to open that period of nomination, it must be clear that the end term ends prior to the opening of nominations for a prospective new term. So the hope of that school board member was to end at the end of the school year. Well, that's not definitive enough and doesn't allow us to put it on the ballot. So Liz has been in touch with that school board member. Subsequently, she has tendered her resignation on Monday. And so what will be required now is to continue that process with that one-year term, which was already sort of advertised as being open. The select board will have to vote to shorten the nomination period for this seat that would be open on the ballot in June. And the nomination period would be from March 26th until the date when all other nomination papers are due, which is April 11th. Does that make sense to at least the 5 of you?
Yes.
Do we have a motion?
I'll try. I make a motion that we shorten the nomination period for this one-year term select board for the dates of March 26th through April 11th.
School board.
or select board?
School board.
School board, sorry.
Nope, good, well done. Is there a
Second.
second? Kim, second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Okay. Unanimous. And do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Okay, so adjourned. All right, now we can call to order the combined Select Board Budget Committee meeting of Tuesday, March 25th, 2025. It's 6:03 here in the Parker Room. And tonight our first item is Buildings and Grounds. I see we have Glenn already up, ready to talk to us.
He's ready.
And this is
I'm
page
ready.
283.
I just to quickly open this section, there are a number of projects that were proposed within this by Glenn in his budget. In no way does that mean that those projects are unimportant. However, the number here was really I was really trying to get to a lower number here. And this is part of the age-old, conversation we've had over the last 2 weeks. How much do you pay now versus how much do you pay later? And certainly Glenn can walk you through all of these various line items within the given line items for each building. But, you know, you have, in 2 buildings, you have boilers that are in need of replacement. In this building, you have a sprinkler system that's in need of replacement. Those are items that were cut from my budget, from what Glenn had proposed. Doesn't mean the boiler problem went away, doesn't mean that the sprinkler problem went away. It's merely to try to get this number to a place where we can accomplish a number of projects that we need to, but also recognize that there are some larger issues ahead. I'd also add that we are undergoing that review of these buildings, both the Opera House, the Public Safety Building, the Town Office Building, and now also the Public Works Building. So there will be sort of that plan, that master plan, that larger plan to attack the issues in those places. But again, trying to get this number to a place where we can fit it into a larger budget. I just didn't think we had the room to do so. I would also add, for those who aren't familiar with this part of our town government, the Buildings and Grounds Department is one that was part of Public Works for many years, decades. The Public Works Department had somewhat taken on not just the road work in town, but the buildings improvement and everything else under the sun. Those were Public Works projects. And there was an attempt to try to include within that Public Works Department one individual, and Glenn was that individual when I arrived, who would focus predominantly on those issues, but was also a Public Works employee as well. And looking at the state of repair, or maybe disrepair, part of one of the first budgets I brought forth separated Glenn and the Buildings and Grounds Department into its own realm. And I think we've been wildly successful in tackling projects, being able to, you know, pay for materials and pay for the labor that Glenn and Matt, who works for Glenn, employ, and allow us to get a lot of work done that would cost us tens of, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars more, without the hard work and careful planning that Glenn and Matt have brought to the table. So it's been a new thing, but it's something that I think has worked very well for the town and allowed us to get a lot of work done that we wouldn't have otherwise have been able to accomplish. So that's Buildings and Grounds.
Helen?
Yeah. I had a question about this Building and Grounds Workshop, items 3570 and 5170, for a total of $40,000. Is that a freestanding building? I presume that the...
No, it was more to update a particular area at the Public Safety Building, what I was planning on doing.
Okay, so the 3570, 20,000, that to construct the workshop within the larger building.
Yes.
And then the 5170 is, what is, that's under supplies, so is that, I presume, the wood? I mean, what's the difference between the two listings?
Well, that was an idea on that, well, you're talking about over on the page that I submitted. This was more of an idea to make a different structure over at the Public Works Building into a facility that would be usable, but it was going to cost a lot more to do it that way, I think. Mm-hmm. So we've opted to try to stay inside already existing walls and just divide it off and put in some good dust control and that kind of thing. That's why the price
Maybe
was lower.
Megan
So-
could clarify
The
those
third-
two categories.
The 3570 is to cover like electrical work, to install the dust control system, stuff we can't do ourselves by permitting. And then the supply line, the 5170, is for like them constructing the walls, putting up the sheetrock, that part of it.
Okay.
That's the difference.
And we're using in-house labor, but we're purchasing the materials. We're using in-house labor when we're allowed to.
Correct. We're not allowed to do like electrical and plumbing work ourselves.
So what part of the building is looking to be reconstructed.
It wasn't looking to reconstruct, we were looking to try to give a space, a workshop space. The proposal that Glenn had proposed was to build a workshop space so that you could effectively do woodworking, you could have dust control, you could have the ability to work in a space and get, not litter your trucks with sawdust at the same point. So it's basically a dedicated area for just buildings and grounds.
But this is within the building though, because
within
it's
the
not an
building.
outside.
No, but again, that's a cut that I made because I don't think we have the space right now to fit that. And I'd like to say there is, but there isn't. We just did a walk around this afternoon, and space is even more is even more of a challenge than even I would have put forward even when I made this cut. There's no room to add this space without adding external space. to do
Okay,
so.
because I thought it's still fire station on one side, police station on the other.
But this is a public works building.
Oh,
Oh,
it
that-
says public safety, public.
Oh, Public Works.
Original is public safety, sorry, then we
Okay.
talked about moving to public works. So there've been a couple
Okay.
different efforts to try to do this. There was also one to,
So the 3570 is public safety.
sorry, 3570, yeah,
It's
that's
public
right.
safety.
But 5170,
Yes, this one's 57, yeah.
5170 says public safety.
Right, sorry. I got
But you're
the numbers
actually-
Mixed up, yeah.
Okay.
We
So,
talked about both spaces is why,
Okay.
we're trying to find a place to give Glenn a home. There isn't a spot for Glenn.
All I
There's no
want
room
is
at
my
the end.
glue to dry.
So does that mean that we don't need those two, if there's no room for it, why would we budget $40,000?
We cut $45,000 from the public safety because that effort won't allow us to fit that room within the public safety building on public purchased and contracted.
Okay, and the 20,000 that remains,
Well, there was also another 50,000 down the public safety, or excuse me, 55,000 that was also cut as well. So
Right.
between the two, you've got
yeah, I'm not asking for more
Yeah.
cuts, but then what's the remaining 20,000 in each of those categories?
you left 20 to construct the workshop.
But if we're not, if there's no.
because we're
room
going to try to work in a smaller space of shelving and not a standalone space with dust collection, and it was not going to be able to be a fully throated effort that Glenn had basically. I'm giving him less than what he needs to do.
But there's
what he
still
needs to do.
space to create some
Yes.
form of a workshop.
You can
I'm just
have
not
two,
quite sure how much space yet.
you can have
that's all.
two sawhorses and
Right.
a plug-in.
And the folding
It's-
ones. so
And the
that you
folding
can-
ones, that's right.
Yeah.
But he'll take
I have
it,
to
right?
move one, and then you just use them one at a time.
You open the windows and
Right,
run the
yes.
lumber up.
So you're just going to reconfigure some stuff there to make space for
I'm just
him?
We're
gonna
going to
keep
do what we
on,
can.
keep on
Get the
going.
most out of what little
Thank you,
there
Glenn.
is, and there
And
isn't
this is
much.
at the,
Public safety.
Public safety, right?
okay,
Because
so
in
his
large-
little office is gonna, not office, but workshop is
Well-
gonna go in the public safety building.
The idea is to try to get a small space where we can have to hang hang a hammer, hang some spots so that it's where the services they're delivering most, whether it's town office, opera house, library here, and have them, that's where they're working, so to give them something of a place to hang their hat.
So where's his stuff now?
Mostly in the van.
In the van.
Some in the old salt shed, and the last thing I was finishing was, what was I finishing? The countertops in the break room at the town office, and it was like, I'm putting 5 or 6 coats of urethane on it, and there's trucks backing in by, and the dust coming off the, it's just hard to do a
Right.
quality job without being able to
Without having
control
the
the
space.
environment around you, that's all.
Right.
That's right.
I mean, I
No,
make
that's
do, but
understandable.
then you also don't want paint fumes where people are, and, you gotta have a place for the
Come
glue to
on,
dry.
that's fun.
and
Whee!
It's fun for a while.
Eyes, kite on fumes, yeah.
So we need a creative solution.
And
making-
what, so,
yeah.
in the public safety building, that 20 grand in the 3570, and the 20 grand in 5170, that's all going for
In
a
part.
hole in the wall
Well,
shop.
Well, no, because that's all the maintenance and upkeep for that building for the year.
Okay, so that's
So
not
it's-
just
it's
for
more.
It's
historic.
not
Yeah,
just,
that's, thank
right,
you.
it's not just
That's
one
what we're trying to
project.
needle.
Okay.
Yeah,
Right,
that's what was
exactly.
getting confusing.
Yeah.
And that's where, right, and it's somewhat similar to, we had this conversation with Public Works the other night, where, we can talk about tree work and the projects that you have planned, but as we all know, things come up. And that sounds like a very empty conversation, but it's true. We have a window right now that we were talking about that needs to be removed outside the police department. So when do we do that? Where does that come, what budget does that come out of? It comes out of this line right here. So those are and with a 60-year-old building, those are the issues that we deal with, so.
And we have to keep quite a bit in that maintenance line for things like when I have to call the boiler people, like we just had to call down to the harbor again.
Right.
Stuff quits, and the license people have to come do it, so. And
So
those
tell me
people
about the
aren't
boiler. What about the boiler
cheap. The boiler at that building?
at the public safety? How old is
Well,
that?
it's up to its reasonable lifespan according to the commercial building times, which is 20 years. So it's still running fine over there, but. I mean,
You have
we
a
just
service
gotta-
annually?
Right, yes, yes.
And you haven't had any breakdowns or repairs?
Nope, not in that building, haven't had any breakdowns, repairs yet. Just,
Okay.
they do the annual service, they do filters and
I'm familiar.
cleaning, yeah.
I'm
you know,
aware of that in
you
my
know quite.
previous life.
Yeah,
Nozzle filter strainer, vacuum.
We'll know who to call.
And this was a situation where, again, cut out both the amount to replace that boiler in that building as well as the one at the Harbor Masters building. And Glenn, we're talking today and said, well, the Harbor Masters building went out again. So these are the situations you run into. You cut things that you know you need to address, but to what end, how much can you afford in a given year? So both were on the choppy block as a result.
Do we have service contracts on them?
yes.
We do,
So historically, we didn't have numbers really
right.
for these, because these are new line items. Well, last year, I should say, we didn't have any, but in years prior, it looks like we had some.
Yeah, you want, how we brought in the numbers?
When we created this buildings and grounds administration budget, basically I took historical information from those individual department budgets and moved it to this so that we could have some indication on what had historically been spent. So that's why there's numbers in those previous spots. More so for like the contractual services than the supply lines, because most of it we had to contract out.
Okay.
So, how many buildings have boilers that are failing or close to failing? And do we have any sort of a reserve account or accounts to take care of that? Is that something that needs to be set up?
I don't know about the accounts, but we have that building and the harbor building are the two that are, the harbor's past 20 years, so, and it's been failing a lot. You'd think they'd fix all the pieces, it would still stay running, but it's been problematic. But those are the only two buildings that are up in the next couple of years. This one here has been in for 13 years, I think, these boilers here, which that would be probably the next area.
The public safety building has $15,000 in a reserve, but that's being used for the study that's being done on the building, and then,
Which presumably would include evaluation of the boiler.
It will.
Correct.
Yep.
So this budget, line 3550, you're leaving in the boiler replacement for the Harbor Master's house. Am I reading
No.
that correctly?
it's in there.
Wait, on the Harbor Master?
Yeah, 3550.
Yes.
40,000.
Yes,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, I'm sorry,
Yes.
yes, Harbor
Yeah.
Master is
Yes.
in it, yeah.
And what is a mini split,
Heat pump.
Heat pump,
Yeah.
On the side of the buildings.
which runs off electricity?
It runs off electricity, and we had some changes to our windows down there. We used to have a little window unit, but won't be as easy to put that in the window.
Is it just one mini split?
One outside unit with two heads
Two
inside.
heads? Still seems high.
Yep.
That seems very high for mini split.
The 13.8.
Yeah.
No, my quote for mini splits at my house was over 10, so, and that was one unit and two heads. So I'm not surprised by that.
That one's a little bit of a odd spot to put them down there too. They gotta hide the piping and because of that little roof that comes off the side all the way around. They can't just run the plumbing real easily.
Okay, so the boiler we've already had trouble with, we've got in the budget to replace.
John or Glenn, would you just clarify for me sort of the chain of command? Mike is a director of Public Works, and Glenn is a supervisor. Does Glenn report directly to you or through Mike? Okay.
Directly to me,
Okay.
yeah.
And I'm assuming the salaries are different for a director and a supervisor?
Yeah. Both department head level, but, yeah, that's true.
Okay.
Any other questions for Glenn? This is, I think, such a great example of, in budget season, we were talking about this a little earlier, how to sort of, you feel like you come in here and our job is to cut the budget more to save our taxpayers money. And I'm not saying that that's not something that can happen in this process, but also what happens is you come up with ideas and realize things that you can do over the next year that will make your town government more efficient, which will in turn help the budget. And this is something where we've now got Glenn and Matt who, we're not contracting out, we're not paying all these extra fees to have people come in. We've got people right on the spot who can jump in and fix things that need to be fixed. And I think it's been very successful.
And I will say, we probably fought that initially in the budget
It
a
was-
couple years
people were-
ago, that
yeah.
it was an expense and a concern, but Glenn and I were talking before the meeting, but look at what we've obtained and the fact that if something needs to be done now, it gets done now. We're not on a waiting list for 6 months. And I'm sure they can do electrical and all of that, but I know we still have to contract that out, so.
Yeah.
Back to, might we consider putting up a reserve, creating a reserve account for some of these, the boilers and things like that across the town offices?
I wonder if now.
Opera House has a reserve for its work, but Public Safety Building, Public Works Building, the town office are going to have large-scale
Expenses.
work that needs to be done.
Most of them have established reserve accounts, they just don't have a ton of money in them.
Okay.
I think some of this gets convoluted too, because each one of these line items in here already has a whole nother department.
Yeah.
Or a whole
Yeah.
nother budget.
Exactly, it's a little
Right.
Yeah.
confusing.
The difficult part is
Yeah.
when we went through the budget for all of
Yes.
these buildings, we've already talked about nowhere in there did a boiler get brought up. I
Right.
understand it's in this department.
Right.
But it's still in that building.
Right.
Yeah, and we haven't
So
gotten to the
it's-
harbor, but maybe it doesn't in there.
Sure, yeah, but even, like the public safety building we talked about,
Yep.
and we,
right.
never mentioned the space or workspace, anything like that, so I'm sure it is hard to figure out how to incorporate the overlap,
Yeah.
but this maybe is just a little convoluted.
Maybe we should do this the first night, so then when we get to the other ones.
Yeah,
And just to respond to that, yeah, the part of the challenge the first year we did this was we had department heads who were responsible for buildings, let's say,
Yeah.
right? And then we had Glenn who was able and could take on projects, but effectively he's spending their budget. So it became
Sure,
a
yeah.
very, it was a sort of, so the idea was really, okay, let's move those repair lines and those, into this area, so that way you had one person who could ride, on top of all those projects and make sure they move forward. But no, I agree with it. There is
Still a
finding
hard
that line
separation
is
line,
a
yeah.
tough one.
I think even if we did like you know, in the library's budget, we have everything grayed out that's covered by.
Oh,
So
good
even
idea,
if we
yeah.
incorporated the public safety
Yeah.
building, contractual services
Yep.
and supplies, and then just grade them out on
I
the
like that.
public
I
safety
think it's a
building.
good idea.
That's a good idea.
It just
Budget.
gives you
Great
the full
idea.
picture,
Just so
yeah.
that, yeah,
Yeah.
at least, I mean, we'll know.
Sorry,
Gray means
Megan,
Glenn.
another late night.
Gray means Glen, yes.
Sorry.
Saying do it similar to like the library
Yeah,
budget,
yeah.
the grayed out items,
Yeah,
to show that they're being taken care of, but they're being taken care of in a different
Elsewhere.
spot.
In different
So
budget.
that way we can see the big picture of, oh, this is what needs to be done. Then when we get there, it's like, oh, okay, we can connect the dots.
I mean, we had to talk about the Opera House, for instance, and
Yeah.
then you
Right.
show up and flip the page, and granted, John cut it, but a $350,000 budget line for the Opera House on a completely separate budget than the Opera House budget
Right.
is a little bit of a curveball that is hard to catch up to. Again, granted, it got cut, but still,
It's just hard to connect the dots,
Yeah.
right? So I mean, yeah.
especially when you're trying to look at what the picture of how much money are we actually gonna spend on the building, because if that Opera House budget went up by 350, back when we were talking about the Opera House, I'm pretty sure more people in here would have said, maybe we do need to look at the Opera House a lot more.
how would you reference it though? You'd flip through, oh, there's a grayed out line, but
Oh,
then
no,
how do
a
you
gray
know whether
area.
you're looking Opera House or public safety or?
Because that grayed out line
Will match.
will be on the Opera House budget.
It'll be in both places.
So when we look at the Opera House budget, it's gonna have all of the depicted lines that were already in there, plus a grayed out line for what Glenn's purchased and contractual services would be and his supplies would be.
Okay.
So
With
you
a
don't make-
specific reference to buildings and
Right.
grounds, so you know.
I think the difference is library is accounting revenue for those line items, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know if it should be in the budget per se, but maybe just a reference, you know,
Yep.
on each departmental budget. that
Yeah.
There
Right.
is this.
And it should-
Yeah.
Megan's sort of a wizard at this kind of
Yes.
thing,
She
so
is.
if we explain the
She can
concern.
wear some of that.
Yeah.
We can create more work for her.
That's right. When in doubt, make Megan do it.
I've just got
Yeah.
one sort of you guy question. So as this came online, because I'm looking at the bottom line here. So we
Yep.
go from the first year that this was broken out,
Yeah.
$230,000, then $279 the next year,
Yep.
then $400,000, now $487 in your budget. So in 4 years, this has doubled.
Yeah.
Is that, how much of that is a reflection, a better assessment of what the costs are because we're parking them in the right place and we've, you know, we're spinning up something new and we're kind of learning as we go? And how
Yeah.
much of that is we're learning that there's new things we have to spend money on? Or how do you account for a doubling of the budget in 4 years?
Well, the first piece of this is we went from one person to two.
Okay.
So that, you know, we added that position, but we also did
In
that same
24?
time. In 24. So what we also did is we took the cleaning of the buildings that was in a separate contract that's, it's not listed here, is it? So there was
Was a line in here that got zeroed out.
it was under that grade section.
Okay.
No, but so all the cleaning of the buildings was in a separate contract that I apparently has stayed with each of those buildings. So that should be in terms of the job tasks that are included here. It should be
Zeroed
there.
out more.
Yeah.
So there was a private contract to do that?
Yeah,
Okay, okay.
exactly. So we had a private contractor, we had, we did have some labor here that we folded into, in this building, that we had folded into this position, this second position. And then, you know, I think in large part also, there's a little bit of the taking from other department, you know, budgets and that gray line that I think we're talking about, referencing. I also think in large part we're finding the different projects that are out there, and I think that we've determined that, you know, what we previously had been working on a year to put out have a contract to go out and redo the roofs of the lime kilns or the kiosks at the harbor. That's a project that we would fold into Glenn and Matt, or you know, redid the stairs at Walker Park. You know, there's shelving right outside the clerk's office. these efforts that we probably wouldn't have well categorized otherwise, we found a home for them.
I think that's part of it.
I think a lot of it too, we leaving it up to other department heads that their focus isn't necessarily the structure that your operations are in. I think we had a lot of deferred maintenance, a lot of things we didn't even know should have been done, that are now being done, that really should have been done that whole time.
That's true.
I have one more question. On page 284, under key budget changes, it says vehicle painters would like to look into purchasing a new truck dedicated to building and grounds. I thought we bought a construction van for tools and so on just a couple of years ago. Who's using that?
We're like Oprah here, everyone gets a vehicle.
I wish. I mean, I've seen it around town, and then the selling point there was that it would be, it's all enclosed and safe and all of that, and everybody they just pick up and go to. So who's using that van?
So Matt, who works for Glenn and does the cleaning in the buildings, he's using that van.
Okay.
So the truck, so just to remember how this all came to be, the vehicle that Glenn is using presently is an old police cruiser that was originally supposed to be the town office vehicle.
I was gonna say, not that thing.
Yes. And through conversations here, it got repurposed into a buildings and grounds vehicle. Now, and Glenn has used that with great ability and like we all have.
Enthusiasm.
Get the most out of an SUV as one can.
Just don't look in the back.
Yeah, right. No comments about the cleanliness in the back, right? But ideally, in the best of all worlds, there would be a pickup and there would be the van in terms of the two-person aspects to how that department works.
And what's the line item here? 'Cause
There isn't one because we're not
we're
funding
not
one
doing
right
it.
now.
Okay.
But it's a good question, and someday we'll have that conversation. But
If I'd known you wanted a
Not today.
van, I'd sold you Bill's truck.
Well,
a good truck.
People
Yeah,
be
we got a good
aware,
price
if you know
for
of
it,
a
too.
cheap truck,
That's right.
think about it for 20.
Plus, it
reliable.
makes me drive slower around town when I see that vehicle coming.
oh, really?
It looks just like the SUV cruiser.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah. It's a little traffic control as well.
Yeah.
that's right.
I tried to pull you over, but you wouldn't stop.
Yeah, I ran.
Question, line 3090, miscellaneous contracts. Glenn has 24,000 and there's nothing in there on your side and there's no note.
And Glenn's note is sort of incomplete.
Increase 4.
Yeah,
Just throwing it at the wall. and
Increase
see what
just in
sticks.
case.
Gotta do it.
flat.
Yeah,
I figured that's why you
there's no way you look.
Oh, the contract, yes, yeah. That was, we had discussed trying to add a part-time individual who could take on the cleaning, in part to lessen the load on Matt, which would then open him up to do more construction and more roofing, better take advantage of his skill set. Again, I'm trying to keep a line here, and
Okay.
I think there's value in it. I think particularly in the summer months, there's a lot more we could accomplish, longer days, but
But if we end up paying prices like mowing prices, maybe we're already set up in-house and maybe we retain that.
Yeah, there is a mowing
I mean,
item here
that,
too.
yeah.
that was still part of the selling point of
that's
building
right.
this whole department, was trying to get rid of some of that budget number so that we could
That's
soften the blow in this department at the start of it.
That's true. No,
And then we're adding it back in.
no, we're not.
Well,
That's what we're not doing. I think what we're also saying is we have skills that we could take advantage of, and for whatever you get for an hour as a carpenter, as a roofer, that's more than what your average cleaner might get. So again, it's not in here. It's worth a conversation at some point. I just don't think it's this year.
Especially if it's seasonal, it seems like contract makes a lot of sense. It's
Yeah.
That's
extra work.
Yes, yes. It's surprising how hard it is to find people in that field, though. So,
In the cleaning field or the?
in the cleaning field, yeah, we, you know,
I
even
think it's
just
in
on
any field nowadays.
this is true. This is true, yeah.
And we have the mowing and garden contracts, is that, town office with
It's
30?
the garden
6:30?
contract
in
at
mowing
the
gardens
town
down here.
office, the garden contract at the
yeah.
public safety building.
Goats.
There's a path somewhere.
Yeah, down here, down
Eagle Scout Path.
the Eagle Scout Path. This is the sort of catch-all for, we had the contract in 3 sections. I think, remember I discussed this the other night. We had the cemeteries, the parks, and then we had the sort of town
Right,
sort of nondescript areas, the high sidewalk, these areas that don't really fit anything else. This is where they
this is where they go,
live,
okay.
I guess.
So that, I mean, to me, that's a part of a bigger discussion that we've touched on, that we'll have
Yeah.
independent of the budget, but realizing it's coming out of the budget is how much we're spending on mowing as a town, and is there a way to make that more efficient or more cost-effective for the town? All right, anything else?
It also includes the gardens at the West Rockport Fire Station.
Whenever they exist.
And like gardens at the town hall, I guess that's the daylilies, the pots and stuff that are there too?
The mulching around the
Different.
trees.
Yeah, yeah. But yes,
The
definitely
garden
daylilies.
pot, the pots that replace the flower gardens.
Okay,
This is sort of a half thought, not really a specific request, but these, it'd be sort of helpful to me if we could break out somewhere just overall like capital items. Because seeing, $350,000, that's not an annual expense for the Opera House, that has a long lifespan.
Yeah.
So I don't know what that looks like, but if there's some sort of just capital breakout versus like these recurring items, I think that'd be a little easier to swallow.
Hi, Allison.
I think,
failure of leadership.
and I
Maybe
don't
it's in
know.
here and I missed it.
Well, no, and I think somewhat in line with what Clay's talking about. I think that's somewhat the idea, right, is being able to say, let's talk about the Opera House and what that
Especially when
means.
it's capital items.
Yeah, I think that's sort of
Yeah,
that
yeah,
holistic
exactly.
view of what that means.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Just making sure, what I'm thinking about, and it's not really the point that Clay's trying to make, but making sure it's clear, okay, Glenn, you've got free reign to do what needs to be done here. You're working with Megan in this building, but it's, go to it, and same elsewhere. But I think you're right, Walker, like that's an important piece, and it does drive home what Clay's talking about too.
All right, anything else?
Well, I just have a
John,
question. I
sorry.
mean, at a glance on the budget summary, if you look at that, line 3,000, it drops from 536, from Glenn's request to 137. It's a huge drop. But the department head, the personnel services, employee benefits stay exactly the same. So I'm just kind of curious, because it would seem like if a lot came out of there, wouldn't it, where is the extra,
That's that
Staff.
350, isn't it?
where is the extra staff time going to go?
Well, that 3,000 section is us paying somebody else to do the work. Where we come into, it's the 5,000. That's when we're buying the supplies to do the work ourselves.
But wouldn't Glenn be the one overseeing all that contracted service, and wouldn't that consume some portion of his time?
It would, but
It would.
instead, he's doing the work.
So
in the
should
5,000.
we increase then the 5,000 line because he can do more? I mean, it just seems a little incongruous here. Maybe it's just me looking at it.
No, I mean, I agree with the concept of the work still needs to exist. In large part because those projects are contracted, obviously the time involvement is quite a bit different because he's not the one hands-on making those repairs. But there is something to be said for the idea that if you're not gonna have someone else do it, we have to find a way in some other capacity. I will also say though, the big reason why there's such a imbalance there is that one issue, which is the sprinklers in this building. And that's a $350,000 item, which
It's another one you gotta be licensed to do as well, so.
You do,
You can't even go in and do it. You
Yeah.
can't inspect it, you can't
yeah,
repair it, you can't do anything, so.
if
You can't have a lot of engagement with that.
Right,
That's-
I can watch them work a little bit, that's about it.
if we
Let 'em
remove
in.
that from the budget, like if, that was a separate piece, I think the cuts and everything might be more in line. It does feel a little bit more, the balance is a little bit off.
I mean, I'm
Yeah.
not suggesting I have an answer to that, other than it just,
Yep.
at a glance, it looks a little off.
Yeah.
My next question is, with some of these capital items are fairly substantial, could we ever do something with a bond to just kind of roll all this together and get it covered and do a big catch-up?
We
And,
did that once before.
well, okay, we've done it once before, which means
Several times, yeah.
we can do it again.
The only difference with the Opera House is that we rent this facility out and therefore make money here, so we can't do a tax exempt bond for this facility. So if you wanted to do something here and then other municipal buildings, we would have to do two, one for the Opera House and then a tax exempt one for all the other ones.
Could we take a year and not rent it out?
I don't really feel like getting arrested for tax fraud, so.
I don't know, I mean, I don't know how,
By donation.
Well, it'd be for the duration.
Is that-
What's the advantage of actually taking a bond out for it all as opposed to,
You pay a little bit at a time versus, having to take it into operational budget.
You got it.
It's closed.
but in the long run, it seems as though you end up paying more if
Yeah, you
you're
do.
paying bond and interest.
But it's like any other loan, a car loan or something like that, you, rather than try to buy the car outright, you pay out over time, and, so,
Which you pay more for, and we're trying to avoid
well,
paying more money.
we're trying to make sure we have get the repairs done that we need to get done, is what I'm focused on.
We do potentially have some other funding sources here for this building. That once everything's ironed out will probably be presented to the board that could cover like the sprinkler system replacement stuff.
Okay.
But I would also maybe suggest in the same way that we're in the middle of the harbor, strategic plan and trying to work through that, the efforts that we're employing with a local architect to look at this space. My hope is that from that work, a plan will be generated for all of these spaces that the board and the larger community will be able to say, okay, this is what the whole enchilada is for this building, and this building. How do we get there? And I think we still need more information to be able to fully throw it and say we can put a bond forward, but that's a solution that gets all of these problems resolved. But we have to be thoughtful about it. And again, I'm talking about 4 different buildings, which means if you assign cost to them, that's a very expensive endeavor to deal with all 4 issues at once. So I think we may be there at some point, but I think I need to get more information to all of you so some
Okay.
better decision making
So
can come
then
forward.
another question I have actually is about the harbor building. We don't have the, the plan yet from the consultants. So are we going ahead to put the boiler in? Is that what we're saying we're going to do
Yeah.
in this budget?
Yeah.
So
That's
what
above,
if
that's
we have
above the
to-
water line anyway.
That's the issue, right?
I'm sorry, I missed that
It's
one.
above
I said
the
that's
water
above the
line.
water line anyway, it's up in the attic.
Okay, but what if we have to move the building?
Yeah.
then? That's what I'm suggesting, so.
I don't think it would affect any of that. If you had to pick it up and move it, that extra weight's
All
already
right,
there anyway.
Just as long as, you
Yeah.
kind of anticipate that, there's high probability that something's got to physically change down there to
Yeah.
make it more resilient. So
Yeah,
I don't even pretend to know what that is, other than, The water
Well,
keeps rising.
at the most you'd have to do is take the boiler back out and set it down, but you know what I mean? The rest of the systems are all gonna stay in place if you move in a building anyway, so.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's it.
I'm not an expert. I know this can have to be dangerous.
Anything else for Glenn? Okay. We'll move on. Thank you
Thank
very
you,
much,
Glenn.
Glenn. Next, we have the town clerk. Liz Lowe is here, and it's page 113. Do you want to say anything in introduction, or Liz, or do you just launch into questions?
It's a fairly straightforward budget from Liz. Obviously, we've had, as we mentioned, the number of elections we've had this year.
So we should be down to just 2 this year, right?
Just to.
Yeah. No state
We're
ballot in
lucky.
June either,
No
so,
primary, no.
Yeah.
yeah.
Liz obviously has the best job here in that her revenues look absolutely
Yes.
outstanding.
I love it.
So, and this will be no questions, no. But in terms of the rest, the budget impacts largely I think, you know, the hardest number in here that to work with was the excise number. And that's, you know, largely, again, excise is a bit of a dartboard toss. But we feel we're gonna comfortably be over 1.1 this year. And, you know, given that recent run, it seems like 1.2 is very feasible for us in this budget, so.
Well, where do we think we're gonna land for the current year? Do we have any kind of
1.1.
crystal ball? I'm sorry, did he say
Yeah,
that?
1.1.
I missed it.
And usually, I mean, you can see there's projections on excise table.
Page 119.
Yep. So you can see when you look at the bottom half, is really you know, you can see in the early part of the year is sort of the ebb of the excise collection year, but it picks up as warmer weather. People want to buy new cars, and that seems to be reflective of what comes in the door. So it's not exactly a 50% to 50% of taking 567, but it seems to rebound pretty nicely in May and June,
And do
So
we,
we're
on average.
sorry, do we keep all the excise tax, or, okay.
One of the few things.
Okay, so anything we collect in Rockport stays in
Yeah.
Rockport, we don't have to pay
Yeah.
anyone else, okay?
There are
Complain
other
about it as much.
collection fees from BMV that we do
Right.
have to turn over.
The state fees?
Yeah, the state fees.
$35 a registration.
Yeah. But it's not, excise is the name of the game.
Excise is ours.
Okay,
Yeah.
nice.
And one thing, just as a rule of thumb, excise is considered to be a barometer of road construction. So, you know, you should be spending, the argument is you should be spending as much in road construction as you are in excise tax collections. Now, obviously, we aren't making that mark this year with 1.2 million in revenues and 919 plus, but in terms of that paving number, it doesn't line up. But regardless, there's a bit of a connection there, because everyone knows they hate to pay excise when you register a car. I understand it. I'm there with you. But the ability to say this goes directly back into paving roads and taking care of our roads, maybe it takes a little sting out of it, maybe.
In the spirit of Mark Kelly, who's not here with us, he always talked about people who move to the community but do not register their vehicles in the community.
Yes.
And what do we do about that? Because I know I see many cars
I
on
think
my
your
road.
brother would've-
What's that?
Your brother would have been here yesterday for that question.
But yeah, I mean, I do think we do have opportunity with that.
Yep.
So,
it's definitely a police department
I'm
matter.
happy to bring that up.
It is his birthday, I
It
believe.
is his birthday on
soon.
Saturday.
So happy birthday, yeah.
I mean, you gotta
And
sit-
some of it could be education. I'm not saying we.
Right, no, right, it
there's
could,
some-
but-
So we could just sort of
Absolutely.
make sure there's something in
But
the
now that I've
newsletter.
learned we get to keep this all, which I didn't know that in the past, there's even more incentive for us to do it.
So how much is the increase in the excise tax that we're projecting is due to inflation, or is it just more, more consumer activity? Is there,
Have the
Value
rates
of the
gone
vehicle.
up
Do we have
that
any?
we're
No.
paying for
No.
vehicles?
No.
It's based on the market value of the
Yeah.
vehicle.
Of the
and
vehicle.
Vehicles are
So
way
it-
more expensive now.
A lot more
Okay, so
expensive.
it may not be an increase in terms of activity,
No.
but it's an increase in revenue.
In value.
Right.
yeah.
Because when you look at this history, the revenue is relatively flat until this last year, which it appears to be coming in, a little bit stronger than what we had budgeted. So I guess my question for you, Liz, is if the revenues essentially are flat, they're increasing essentially only due to inflation, what else, what other activity is there? I mean, is your activity directly related to essentially the excise tax, or is it other things besides elections that are happening in your neck of the woods?
No, I would say excise has definitely, that's the decision that we made, I think if I'm answering your question correctly, that we made, looking at these numbers, the prices of vehicles are going up, especially now, the beginning of this year. There's different sales that go on. We see the influx during like the big President's Day sales for vehicles that we always know the weeks after that, we're going to be, we'll be busy. I think that's what I'm understanding, John.
Well, I guess in one way, part of my question is the increase in excise tax. It's really not an increase in activity. It's just an increase in the cost of the goods that are that we're taxing.
Right, yeah.
Redounding to our benefit with additional revenue.
Right. So that's all good. But I guess you're asking for help in the clerks, in the office. And I'm trying to correlate that with where is the extra activity?
That portion of it, asking for the extra help, goes into not just registering the vehicles, it goes into just the traffic in general in our office. I did mention October was hands down, our busiest walk-in, in-person tax day, people coming in to make tax payments. And like I mentioned, we had to recruit our CEO to take payments, and he had only been on the job for a couple months, threw him right into that. Yes, we had, in January to January, we had 4 elections, one being a presidential, one being a primary. The presidential was heavy because it was, the state was requiring a lot from the clerks. But we just see an influx of people walking in the building. Even in the 2 years I've been there, I don't know. Coming from Camden, I always attributed it to the parking in Rockport. Like, it's so much easier to get into this building, but we do find that, I have in April and May, there's 2 of us that have to be out for college graduations. That leaves Shay alone for 5 days. And it's just her. And I think you've seen the new plates coming in. She'll be taking tax payments. She'll be switching over plates from the Chickadee plate to the Pine Tree plate, or the other plate, the non-Pine Tree if you choose. We promoted her to deputy a year ago, and I haven't been able to utilize her. She's got 10, 11 years worth of knowledge as my deputy that I can't bring her into that election side of it to teach her how to order ballots, to really push some of that onto her. She's on the counter. The cemetery program, we had to bring someone in for 5 to 6, 7 hours a week to input data because, we paid for the program and I don't have anybody else to focus on that. But that's where that comes from.
When you look at the number of Chickadee plates that they're changing over in John's letter, we have 9,259 registered vehicles with those plates, just those plates. Those plates alone, that means they're registering 192 vehicles a week.
Right.
Holy moly.
Yeah, well,
And this, you can't do that, you can't do these rapid renewal. You can, I'm finding in our town, a lot of people just, they don't want to do it online. They want to come in. Doug and I were just going over this earlier. But they basically, unless they want to order their plate that they have now online, they have to come in the office and we have to either take their plate and issue them the new one. So, and that's going to be, it should be seamless, but it will be a transaction that will probably take a little more time.
So the new
So-
plates actually come into you, and then
They're starting
I'd have to
to,
come and get it from you. How do I know if you have my new plates?
if you're keeping your number, you like the number on your Chickadee plate now, you have to request it through the
I already
state.
did that.
Perfect. Then you
So-
will get yours in the mail.
Oh, okay.
And then, yes, you have to come in when it's time to renew your registration. Let's say it's June. You'll bring your new plate into us in June and we'll put your
Well, I already-
stickers on it.
Yeah, mine was this month. So will I take the stickers off my current plate when this new one comes in?
If yours was up this month
Yes.
in March, yours won't be here until March 2026. So
So please see her at the town office.
Well, I'm just thinking of adding to her thing, maybe an article in the town
been-
news thing. Is,
yeah.
This is what's gonna happen, and if you did this, this is when you get it. If you did that, this is, and stuff like that.
So not only those 9,000 plates there's 2 stickers on each, so I have Wendy's, they've been arriving, so she has to maintain that inventory weekly. So,
Plus there's commercial plates, trailer plates.
Tractor
camper
plates.
Right.
yeah.
Like,
I vote for
Well,
giving
thank
her-
goodness the state gave us extra money to deal with all of that.
so,
Is there any room for volunteer staff in the clerk's office? Or, well, there you go.
it's a lot of training. We do have some people within the office that are cross-trained, that can step out and maybe register a car, but it just falls down to the point of they may step out, let's say in September, and then come December, and we say, can you come out? That's gone,
different,
that's not their
yeah.
job. So it's retraining all over again, or even the tax payments, they're due in a few weeks here. We've already got Andrew like, okay, do you remember how to do this? You know,
Yeah.
because I don't expect April to be as heavy as October was. A lot of people did pay a year in advance, but we still have the timeshares.
Yeah.
That's a huge pile of tax payments.
And how many people do the monthly tax club?
The tax club.
Right now, we probably have about 60 in the tax club.
That's all?
Yeah, that's all.
I find it wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah.
so Liz, you did a great job in answering my question about,
I hope I did. I
what
did
the
okay.
activity is. Thank you for that.
Sure.
Now, if the elections are not there, is there any additional time that you're going to get time back, right? I mean, I'm just, like, how much of an impact were the elections, hitting you? Or is it?
So you're still trying to get at how essential it is to
Yeah,
give the,
just, because I
fund the
I'd
additional
love to-
staff
I mean, it was in the budget. It's not in the budget now, as John's recommending it. So I
What a lot of
think,
people don't realize about elections is you have your election day, and 30 days before the election, you can absentee vote. I begin probably 90 to 120 days before you come in to cast your ballot. So last year was last year. Each time March, we finished an election. 2 weeks later, the state was sending me my paperwork to start the next one. Right now, June, I'm already receiving absentee requests online. So that started. It's perpetual. This year, thankfully, like they said, there's only 2. And June will just be our town meeting and the school. But the school adds in another.
so as, also, I'm just kind of curious, having the ballot election now for the town meeting instead of having everybody upstairs raising a card, is that adding work to your office?
It does add work, but I have to say I prefer it. We have seen a huge influx in people that do come out to vote for the town meeting rather than sitting in the Opera House and, because you can cast your ballot.
45 people,
of the
right?
town,
Yeah.
Yeah.
speaking for the other 3,500.
And just to add about, in terms of your question, John, about the mix, and, you know, we basically built the clerk's office in the vision of, what is it, normally, well, the elections are an outlier, right? That's sort of how it's, you know, it takes two people plus the town clerk, and then that's how we do it. And then what's happened, though, is that there are other parts of, obviously, the record keeping, the maintenance of our records, you know, issues like trying to add a cemetery program in the middle of it. Those are extra issues that sort of don't fit in. So you're right. On the one hand, when you lose those 3 extra elections that you shouldn't have had to do, okay, great, we're back now to status quo. But that still doesn't necessarily provide the headroom on some of those longer term projects. And you know, the cemetery issue, the cemetery program is one of those. But there's a handful of projects like that just, you know, don't occur. One thing that we haven't talked about, we're going to talk about the harbor later on, is that Abby has taken on some of those responsibilities in terms of, you know, the record keeping for her mooring field and online mooring, and working with trying to remove those things from the clerk's office, because what do we all do when we walk in that door? We look for Shay, or we look for Wendy, we look for Liz, and help solve our problem, because I've got 18 things and I need to, you know, and you're going to help me do them all. And it's what we all do. I mean, whether like it or not, it's what we do.
That's what we're there for, too.
It's what you're there for. But trying to find a way to simplify that and make it easier for them. But it's an amazing thing that we all do to them on a daily basis down there, and they do a great job. All 3 of them do a great job. But it's when you add, you know, bumps in the road, like 3 more elections or 9,000 license plates.
New dog program.
New
new liquor licensing program.
Right.
Those 2 were thrown on us.
In the middle.
In the middle of the elections. They
Yeah.
decided to implement this new
Outrageous.
dog licensing program, which we don't make a lot of money on. It's very time consuming if anybody came in and licensed a dog. It's very clunky. I'd be shocked if the state still kept it. And then on top of that, a new online liquor license catering special amusement permit that we are still working our kinks out. But.
So here's a thought. You know, when we know we're going to have, you know, a year of 4 elections, when we know we're going to have a, you know, floodgate for some single event, can't we budget something to get contract help, or, you know, somebody in the wings? And would that be a reasonable middle ground here from eliminating the position altogether versus just getting you some extra help?
We did do that
contract
during the presidential. She actually volunteered her time, and because we could not keep up with the 100+ absentee ballots coming in and out of the office daily. The problem with that is, and we talked about it, thought about it, it goes back to the training and everything that we do, from registering cars to licensing dogs to licensing boats to hunting and fishing license. It's constantly changing. It's, you know, you walk away from it for 4 months, and during, you know, our busy season or what have you, you come back, we're retraining. But that doesn't help us with the issue of my deputy clerk has an exponential amount of PTO that she cannot use. And as her boss, I hate having to say no. She's leaving for a week and a half. It is well deserved, and it's right before tax season. That leaves Wendy and I. So it'll be busy, and evidently Andrew. Taking some tax payments, but you know, she was never allowed to use this PTO before, and she's earned it, and I don't want to burn out my deputy either. So,
Okay.
One thing that we are going to do, assuming the budget, that we do have a position that is open right now that we'll be interviewing in the next few days, which is the assistant at planning and codes. And Liz and Orion have been working together and trying to attempt to fold some of the needs of Liz's department in to that position, so we can at least try to provide some of that headroom. It's not cross-training because we need to have these people do this work with some consistency behind it. There's 4,000 ways to register a car in the state of Maine. So maybe you're not touching 2,000 of them frequently, but it's often enough that you need to have some frequency. So there will be some duties that are sliding over to that window that, now probably many of you are familiar with, to try to lighten that load and then allow some of that project work for a deputy to be able to take on. But it's not a full-time position that stands on its own, and it really is, it's a compromise of compromises. But it's a way to try to meet the need, see what help happens to have another person in that space who can lighten the load, who maybe, if there are two people away and Wendy's the one who's there and she needs to get a bite to eat, someone's at that window who can say, well, I can help you with this, and this. If you want a vital record, you might want to come back in a minute here, but I can do most of what you need to do. And that's the hope, is to try to get to that level.
What are you doing with all your time?
Well, apparently.
Apparently he's gonna learn how to register cars.
Yeah, I'm gonna learn how to register cars with the cemeteries or something.
The cemeteries, that's our revenue.
On the question of it's an interesting question of how do we judge the sort of, I don't know if the visitation is the right word. Can you track like the number of people who come through the door? Or do you have because we don't really have good metrics here to get a sense. I assume we'll be back discussing this again next year.
Yeah.
I mean, it'd be good to have hard numbers to say this is when the spikes are,
Absolutely.
this is what we see.
Yeah.
And related to that, I think Helen's onto something about letting the town know what can be done online. It's going to seem weird for the town to say, here's 10 ways that you cannot come into the town office, like do these
Sure.
things
Right.
without
Yes.
darkening our door.
Yeah.
That's right.
But, and I don't know if the newsletter is the way, issues with the newsletter we'll talk about later, but there's got to be, I do think, given what we're confronting here, it's worth some type of public push, a postcard,
Agreed.
something to say, do these 5 things online. And
Wanna save
here's how you
taxes?
do it, and some
Yeah.
video, shoot some videos and put them on, I don't know, something
Yeah.
to derail people from coming in the door and get them to go.
Yeah.
Put a QR code on the outside of the door, do this, go back to your car, do it out there, don't even come in.
You're getting beyond us old folks, though.
I know, but.
My son had to do this.
Check in the
We gotta
license
think ahead
box
here.
rather than
Yeah.
walking in and waiting for
Right.
Register a dog online. In terms,
Yes, with this new system, you sure can, yes.
Okay, so may I suggest that this year when you send me out the cards, remind me that I didn't register my dog, that you
We
just
will.
tell me how to do it online?
Online.
Because we had to input all these everybody that registered their dog into this new state program, you had to come in the office. So after,
But now you
now
don't
that,
have
now
to.
that everything's in there, you'll be all set for next year. It's kind
Yeah.
of like a new car. You have to come in the first time and then,
So
after that, you're
reminder
good to go.
card, I'll,
Liz, is the only way to do taxes online is if you put them on a credit card?
yes.
Okay, you can't do like an electronic funds.
No.
I think that's what stops people from doing taxes online, because they don't want the 2.5%
Right.
fee.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you can drop it off. You don't
You
have
can
to
drop
wait
it
in
off,
line
right.
and get
Yeah.
a receipt. You don't have to take up clerk's time.
Yeah.
That works really well when I did the QR code, I think it was last year, for the timeshares, because their annual taxes, maybe $12.
Yeah.
So it's a $1 fee, and a lot of them are either in Canada or down south.
Yeah.
That worked great.
That's
That
good.
did cut down on a lot of.
That's good.
Mail.
to answer one of your questions, Steve, our auditor was just here, so I had pulled some information for fiscal year ending '24. That year, we issued 12,901 receipts. So that means we saw over 12, almost
Almost
13,000 people in the course of a year. And most of those receipts have more than one transaction on them.
Okay.
What year was that, Megan?
For fiscal year ending 24.
I mean, if we have that, it might be helpful to get a sense of what percentage of those are available to be done online. And does that help us focus the town's messaging around what's available? Like if you could take, if the biggest chunk of those are car registrations and we know that 20% of those are going to be basically the same. Like I'm trying to figure out some way to target.
So that doesn't include the transactions already processed online.
Right.
So those are just the ones processed in-house. And
Right.
Liz can certainly answer this better, but the people that are coming in to process transactions online, I mean, in person, probably aren't able to process
Agreed.
them online.
I was just gonna say that, yeah.
I get that. That's me.
Or we want to go in because we like to go in.
Right.
So we get the stuff in hand and know
That
that
too.
we physically got it, and then we go.
Yeah.
So-
I have done things in person that for years.
Majority
that
of
I
like,
wouldn't- didn't have to.
yeah, boats, hunting,
Yeah.
fishing license, it can all be done online, but the amount of people that come in the door because they want to pay us, they want to get their physical copy in their
Stickers.
hand
And they
and
might
their
want to ask a
stickers.
question about something.
Right.
Unrelated, yeah.
So pay parking maybe at the town office.
Oh my God.
Well, those things at the airport where you have to go like this.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, I'm going back on this, but I feel bad about cutting out a position from what I've just heard, Liz, and you know, I don't like burning out people.
You don't have to, John cut it.
The other John.
So,
We're listening to our manager.
well, I don't like to cast my vote to burn somebody out, so, let me put it that way. So, contract person doesn't sound like a good idea. What about a part-time position?
Well, that's what we're hoping will happen with the shared person, with Orion. You know, when this was cut, I said to John, we knew, because he knew it was coming, and I knew it was going to be cut. I said, I just need it out there. So when this position came up and it was offered that Orion and I could share it, I'm very excited to have that. I do think eventually it is, in my opinion, I think it's going to prove that I'm going to need a full-time person. But, you know, I'm excited to try it, so.
So that is effectively you're getting a half-time person
Right,
if it all
right.
plays out
Yep,
the way
but
we're
it's,
hoping.
you know, like I said, in April and May, if you come in the office, Shay will literally be alone. I'm not gonna not go to my child's college graduation or slight Wendy for going to hers. She's alone for that full week. So, you know, that, it doesn't sit, you know, it's tough.
And we hope she doesn't get sick.
Bingo, yeah, well, Michael.
I'm Mr. Naysayer, I guess, or Black
So,
Cloud.
but in like the holiday times, we are the ones that have to remain open. So at Christmas time, you know, everybody likes to take time off in the other departments. My two were there the whole week, you know, for like 3 days by themselves. Or storm days. We live close, so, you know, we send the outskirts home and we remain open for the town.
Advocating.
Yeah, no, and I think we had some good ideas here, the idea of coming up with a way to communicate with our taxpayers, to sort of let them know that there are some things in their control too. Anything else for Liz? Great, thank you, Liz.
Thank you.
Maybe we could get those self-serve stanchions there, like they have at McDonald's. You can order your own, you don't have to talk to a person.
Yeah.
All right, next is
saying.
Harbor. We've got Abby here, page 205.
You're gonna need a new phone. You dropped that I don't know how many times.
Page 105.
205.
I know, right? It is warm. Thanks, Liz.
So I would just start here and just say, again, this is another department where major expenses are really TBD. And that determination will in large part, I think, come from the harbor strategic plans efforts. Some of that is not operations based necessarily, but obviously there's offshoots of that. There will be operations based. But in terms of the big picture, big impacts, picking up the building and moving it, those are conversations that have to happen, you know, through that strategic plan. And so really, we can't really even get into that, you know, to a great degree. It's really about operations. And what I would maybe just say is in that this is a harbor that has undergone growth, that has really transformed itself over the last 5 to 10 years, you know. But you know, going down there at an average early June day when seemingly every boat possible is being launched at the same time. The trailers are lined up, the trucks are lined up. Skyhook is moving masts left and right. All the floats are in. It is a beehive of activity, and that's just on one side of the harbor. And you talk about the other side of the harbor. Obviously, the timing is a little different, but just as active as ever. So this is an area that is growing. This is an area that I think we're still trying to get our hands around what it means in 2025, what Rockport Harbor needs to look like, and what do we need to do to make sure Rockport Harbor looks like Rockport Harbor in 2045 and 2055. But what we have, I think, here is a budget that's status quo, that doesn't really change the shape of what we're looking for, what we're trying to do, other than simply maintain what we're doing. And in the same way, it's also a wink and a nod towards what we're doing in a lot of other departments, which is effectively taking on some maintenance needs internally. And that's one thing Abby's been doing more of. The harbor has been a recipient of aid and support from other departments, whether it's Public Works, whether it's the clerk's office, for, you know, sending out bills and the like. Abby has taken on more of that and is sort of internalizing more of that work herself. She's funding, you know, there's costs in here for cranes to move floats. Those were costs that were previously borne by Public Works. But if we have Public Works taking several days down here in May, June, they're not building roads, they're putting floats in. And that's a cost to us as well. So, you know, these are the decisions we've been making over the last couple of years to really try to make sure that the costs of the harbor are the costs of the harbor, and, you know, how to adequately determine the balance of them and how to make sure those costs are shared reasonably amongst all involved. That's a whole nother story. So I know there's some work on the fee schedule this winter, and maybe you can talk a little bit about that, but in large part, at least in terms of expenditures, it's relatively status quo, would you say?
I would say yes, yep. For sure. I always sort of, I wouldn't say on a shoestring, but kind of on a shoestring. Just making sure, you know, we have a 20-year-old boat, a 20-plus-year-old building. Really just trying to make what we have. I mean, that boat is completely solid, but it's getting to be 20 years old. So you'll see some of the supply lines increasing a little bit, rather than, you know, trying to put into a new boat, which would not be cost effective, and I don't want, because it's totally not necessary. But some of the personnel also that we have my deputy harbor master is an outboard mechanic, so we keep all that work in-house, or like a Glenn model of doing things. So we keep it in-house and save a lot there for, you know, a relatively low hourly wage compared to sending a boat out to an outboard mechanic for $200 an hour. So that, you know, I feel really I feel good about all of that, and then all the things Glenn's able to do for repairs, and, you know, the renovations on the bathroom that you all approved last year. I don't know if anybody's been down and seen them. Yeah, it was really, you know, tons of great feedback about that, and Camden's, you know, drooling at our public restrooms. So, but yeah, no, I think really nothing major, and actually some things that, because we're coming up with this plan, whatever we're calling it, the master plan, comprehensive plan, we didn't budget to put in pilings because maybe we won't be using pilings. We were just trying to think of things that, when John and Megan sat down and looked at the budget, things that we could sort of not, just be prudent about not putting good money and then, ripping something out, or, just being sensible about what we're budgeting. So I think we did that with this budget.
John?
So Abby, I'm just curious about the revenue line. Are we projecting that we're not going to hit 240 for our budget for this year, and that's why next year is so much lower for revenue?
Well, 30,000 of it off the top is a grant that we got, or are hoping to get this year, that won't be in next year's budget.
Okay, so even with that, we're still coming in lower.
Just year-to-dates, just looking at historical data and the targets, just kind of trying to be a little more conservative, crossing our fingers and hoping we exceed it, but just don't want to, overshoot, I think is the...
So,
Well, it seems like it would be reasonable to, at least add another 10,000 to that, but just based on historical trending.
We've seen
Are we raising the rates too? Are we increasing the rates?
We have, if John, you want me to talk about the fee schedule? I mean, 3 years ago, I think it was, and Kim, you just came on, but 3 years ago, I believe it was, we had a substantial increase over most categories, a fairly, 20, 30% on a lot of things, sometimes even 50 in some places. And then this current year, we kind of went back over the ones that didn't get hit with that increase and hit them with the same level of increase that we did 2 years ago. So, and I try to, not that we need to sort of be right proverbially in the middle between Rockland Harbor and Camden Harbor. We're a little cheaper than Camden Harbor, a little bit more expensive than Rockland Harbor. Some think we should be more expensive because it's more desirable, but I think that's the place, that's the sort of sweet spot that we have kind of looked at being. So that's, we maintain that. Yep.
So.
And without the sticker shock too.
And not the sticker shock, and not, I think the Harbor Committee, and Kim, again, you can correct me if I'm wrong, make sure that we're not, funding everything on the backs of the boat owners themselves, because it's, there's a lot of other benefit that residents get from the, it's not just boaters that are coming down. I mean, that's everything off the, from the seawall out. But, if you go down there on any given day, there's lots of other people enjoying the 6 acres we have there as well.
Abby, under revenue here, are the private float storage, winter storage, is this in your budget, that revenue?
That's the winter, yes, winter storage is floats as well.
Floats and boats?
And boats, yep. It just hasn't been collected. The bills are out and they'll come in before anyone's allowed to get their stuff out.
yeah, it's usually in early.
So how does that break out, Abby? I'm just curious.
Yeah, as to between what percentage is boats and what's floats?
Yeah.
Ooh, I think
This ballpark.
if a ballpark, it's maybe 7,000 or 8,000 in float storage and the rest in boat storage. So
Half and half.
half and half.
Almost 50.
Yeah.
Okay, and I had a question about the seawall reserve. I mean, isn't that kind of going to get covered by the grant we've got coming in?
Well, the grant covers one half, so this side of the river, the working waterfront side, effectively the park side, the harbor master building side is not. So this reserve was established a few years ago because of the fact that we had been undergoing so much damage, and we start to build up a reserve to provide some sort of reserve funds to be drawn from when damage occurred, or to establish a longer term fix. That was before we were into this world of creating a strategic plan. So ideally, this would be the other pocket that could be used to support that. But obviously, if you look at what we're talking about here, if this was approved and it's part of the budget, you're still at 75,000 compared to 2 million on this side. So there's an imbalance there. There's something that has to be addressed.
So you're saying, I guess I misunderstood what the grant was all about. But it's only for this side of the,
No, it's a working
Working
working waterfront grant, so it has to benefit the working waterfront. So, and
how are they gonna define, I mean, you know,
that's a good question.
I mean, that whole area to me feels like it
Can't-
could qualify as a working waterfront.
It can be, you know, I think the eyes will be on, the fishermen, and the lobster, yes,
Yes.
exactly. So I think, that, because that really makes up the majority of our working waterfront, but there are some other entities that would qualify as well, and whether it's not, our whole side and the park side, I think that might not pass listening. Just kidding. But we talked about not including that, and then I think both John and I had the same feeling that it'll be good to have something there so that we can go after grants, so that we can, so we can start sort of putting, doing some, it could be a match. Just so we have something there as a starting point when we do come up with an idea, not knowing, going like this right now on a dartboard, but we don't know what that's going to be.
Can I go back to the floats again? How many private floats are there that get stored, roughly?
On the park side, there are 11.
So the fee for those is less than $1,000 per float for the winter.
Yep, just about. Around there, $800 a
Yeah,
float.
that strikes me as woefully low. I mean, those are not the low-income people storing their floats over there.
I don't disagree.
So, and who would set those, can we affect that at all during this session? Or does that have to go through
Policy.
the harbor?
Harbor Committee. So I can bring that to them, or Kim can bring that to them in our
Yeah.
regular meeting.
I think you
Because
guys.
we have actually already
you
talked
actually
about
had a
it.
discussion
Yeah.
about it
Yeah.
at the
Well,
last meeting.
It's been,
I wasn't at the discussion because I think that's crazy.
And it's the same with the boat storage. I mean,
Yeah.
those are resources that the town uses.
Yeah, I mean, that's, primo town property, and it's done simply for their convenience, so they don't have to find a professional marine salvage company to store their floats for them, which would probably cost them, $6,000 to have Proc come out and do something with it. So, it's crazy.
no.
What you can do is make a change to that line in terms of revenue. That's what you can do here.
Okay, tell me how to do it.
Well-
Discuss it with,
You would,
Yeah,
you
but
would
you
up
can't.
the amount in the chart so that the pressure's on to gain that? How would you do that?
You'd remove the revenue.
Remove the revenue,
Yeah, you would say,
because they would be going somewhere else.
right.
Yeah. The problem with our beautiful harbor, which is very steep-sided, is that we am it in terms of level ground and equipment.
And there
you know,
are,
it's a whole lot easier to move 20 boats to another place to haul them than it is to move one.
So we can't increase it, but we can decrease it.
You can go either way, up, down, left, right, in between.
and some of those floats are, cannot go over the road, not that I have any, they're there. They were towed, they were built at, in Rockland, and they were towed down by the water, and so they are.
it seems like an appropriate
stuck.
discussion for the harbor committee.
Yeah, it is, absolutely is.
Agree.
Yeah.
Is
Stay
there
out
an
of something we don't
alternative
really
Or the
understand.
parks.
in Rockland, where some people might have those big floats towed, if our rate was too high? I don't
Oh,
have any idea what.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily think, I mean, we can look at it.
So we could do the opposite, we could raise the rates and then we'd raise the revenue on this.
Correct. You wouldn't raise the rates, you'd raise the revenue and give us a target to have to meet, which would then in turn we'd have to raise the rates. It's sort of a.
Although ultimately the rates are set by the select board. So
Correct.
Yeah.
It's a recommendation that the
Comes
harbor
from-
committee-
right.
But ultimately the select board's the one who sets the rates.
Right, so it just would be
And
like one
policies.
step
Yeah.
before the,
Just
kind of backwards.
The harbor committee is like the mafia down there, so.
So are you gonna carry that message to the harbor?
I will carry it with honor, sir.
Got our
And Kim.
select board liaison, so. Okay,
I have a question.
Janet.
Why are the park rental fees the lowest that they've ever been?
Because it's not renting. It's not, people aren't renting it for the high price that we're
It's too
charging
expensive.
for weddings. They will sometimes, and when they do, we have a good chunk, as you see in year to date. But when they don't, that's where you'll see you know, where this current year-to-date is.
What's the rate for the week?
It's something like in the ballpark of, you know, if you were to rent it for 2 straight days, it's something like close to $10,000 for just the dirt.
Just the dirt, right.
For outdoors?
And the bathrooms
Yeah.
and the water
Well, maybe the bathrooms still.
and the
wait
view.
Till the porta potties come into play.
And post-COVID, people, or even during COVID, people really wanted.
Yeah, and I think we'll still gain some, and I think it's not, I wouldn't recommend making it cheaper because we don't necessarily, you know, make it, you know, sort of,
It does take over the whole.
it does take over the whole
park,
park, yeah,
right.
right, it does.
Cost, that's the question. What does it cost to have them down?
Have them down there, that's a
Almost
good question, I've
10,000.
never really figured that part
What
out,
was the cost
but,
of the floats? And then-
yeah.
Well, and it's the lost
put-
opportunity.
And it's just a lost
Yeah.
opportunity
Should
for
be based on
residents to
something.
be able to use the space, which is hard to put a monetary figure on, right? Because
It's priceless.
What the market will be.
priceless, exactly,
Right.
right,
Well, clearly it isn't because people aren't coming.
But
Yeah,
it's
right.
not last year.
yeah. But people have been interested, you know, I've definitely given a few tours, which I think, you know, people seemed interested. So they just have to book. Oh, come here.
Other questions?
The UTV, we didn't end up getting a truck for the harbor, right? Or
That's
we
right.
No, we did not.
No truck.
No, we didn't.
No truck. So
Not
the
everyone
UTV
gets a
So
car.
what, at some point,
Oprah be damned. Yeah, no, it's gonna be a golf cart.
at some point,
Oh,
there will be,
oh, that's what I was gonna suggest.
there will be a
Minute.
new bridge, right? At some point, there will be a new bridge. And when that occurs, there will be no traffic going across this bridge for a period of time, probably one summer. And we expect it's not gonna be this summer, but it could be as soon as next, I believe. If that's the case, we need to have some way to get back and forth, maintain both sides. And we would like to move our dumpster to the other side, which would obviously need a dump cart to be able to get all that trash over there. So that's the new bridge, pedestrian bridge is built wide enough to hold that and deal with it. It's a ramp, so no one's jumping off like the Dukes of Hazzard.
You said the pedestrian bridge is big enough for
It
the
is
golf
big
cart?
It is, yeah.
Yes.
And rated to take one too.
Right.
Yeah.
Loaded with trash.
Loaded with
Loaded with
trash.
Yes.
I might have any people
Right.
on there.
But we can't get to
They're
the
gonna jump
dump,
off.
so that'll be, we could try to get to the dump. Maybe Randy might have trouble.
You might not enjoy that.
We'll just
Might not
borrow
be street
Glenn's
legal.
truck.
I might have a Kubota.
Get with the
for you.
path.
Oh, really? Ooh, let's chat.
All right, other questions? No. All right.
All right.
Thank you, Abby. for
Thank you.
doing a great
Thanks,
job.
everybody.
Thanks, Abby.
I know you do a great job of keeping an eye on the revenue and trying to keep that number up.
Thank
so
you.
Appreciate that. All right, next is Conservation Commission with Orion, and that is page 255.
You open it up and it's just there, it's like this big tree.
You have to eat it. Human power.
That's a great idea.
Look how excited. It's a little reward every time you
It's like an advent calendar.
Yes.
You get so excited.
I love it.
So this is really about water quality monitoring throughout Rockport, right? Not just the harbor, but Chickawaukee, Grassy.
Correct, yes.
Any questions for Orion on this?
And if you do, I'll do my best to answer. I'm the new staff person for that commission, so.
Seems pretty
Yeah, and we have a
straightforward.
dedicated group of volunteers, town volunteers who
Is
actually
this,
do the
this is
monitoring.
where we voted for the,
Data sonde,
Yeah.
Yep, that's right.
is that happening?
The water tester.
where was that last, what? Oh, that's equipment?
Yeah, that's
Yeah, okay.
that's 20 grand. Is that happening this year? The data
I
sonde?
think they got it working.
Yeah.
What is it, Ken?
It's called a data sonde. I don't know what it does, but
We spent a lot of
Water
time
quality
talking about it.
we did.
But it costs $20,000.
Yeah.
The
But I
water
think-
quality monitoring device that they stick down in.
But we already spent 10 in that line. What is,
And last year they convinced it was a really good thing to have.
Yeah.
I can't remember why.
Well, Mark
But it
Kelly
was-
said, well, the least we can do for these guys is give them some.
I just
some money
remember
out.
there was a good reason why we said, yeah, sure.
But we didn't, and they didn't need it, and
Well, yeah, they were able
they
to figure
fixed it,
something
so
out.
things are working well.
Why were we charged a fee from Rockland?
They do our test, they do some of our testing for us. The rest of it's done by a state lab.
So just a quick question on 4135.
Yeah, I
So
don't understand.
we've budgeted 11,001, we've paid out 14,400, but we think we'll only be 10,500 this year?
That's what they submitted to us for testing.
Okay. What happens if we're closer to the 14 like we were this year? Where would that come from? From the contingency fund?
Their department head would need to keep a closer eye on making sure they
Okay.
stay within that.
Okay.
They will stay within.
They will stay within that,
Promise you
okay.
that.
We hear that, okay. That was the only question I had.
Yeah, I was a little confused by the notes under 4135, because it says year-to-date spending is actually 5,042,
Yeah.
but it shows 14,405, so I didn't understand. And it might be several items within that, but.
So it was 5,000 plus 4, but it doesn't include 333.
Right, and that's fiscal year '26 is 55 plus 4 for the DNA testing,
Right.
which is 9,500. And then it says the year-to-date so far, but it suggests that that year-to-date is only 3375, but it's listed at 14,405. Are you looking something up on that, Megan?
No, I don't.
I think
I'd
that-
have to go back through invoices to figure it out.
Okay. It doesn't, the
It doesn't jive.
discussion doesn't match the numbers that are in the budget, so.
Yeah. Who's the staff representative for this group?
I'm the
Ryan.
new one right now.
So he takes no ownership of the.
I don't know what was, a couple of months.
So we have a question about that, is
Yeah.
what the year-to-date spending actually is for that line item. Because the text suggests it might only be 5,000 rather than 14,405.
Are you learning?
Playing basketball upstairs or something?
There's Nancy.
You know, we're
Oh.
going back to being
The Y is
Football
back.
court.
The Y is back in Rockport.
found a new use for the Opera House.
Rockport Y.
What is upstairs?
It's a dance group.
Dance.
It's a rehearsal for Shakespeare play. What
you're
you're
hearing
hearing upstairs is income.
Right.
That's
thank you.
right. Thank you, Clay.
Sound
It's
of
the
money.
beautiful
It's
sound.
the sound of money, that's right.
What is going on up there?
Okay, anything else for Orion on this one?
No, not
Okay.
for me.
Great, thank you, Orion, on that.
Thank you, Orion.
Next, this might be a little more interesting. Planning, page 121.
121.
Deterioration.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, maybe.
So this is a department, I'd say that there is some change that has gone on in this department over the last year. Obviously, we have a new code officer, which brings, a new eye to the way that we operate in general. I would also say that the approval at the polls in November of the licensing and victualers and lodging and effectively ensuring, that process that we're underway with some of our hotels and restaurants is going to change, in large part how we work with our businesses and ensure their compliance for life safety reasons, for code compliance reasons. It's going to add a layer of security that I think we've sort of been the small town that trusts our neighbors and trusts our businesses. And then when the fire department shows up and a second kitchen is in a restaurant, you say, well, now hold on a second here. What's going on? You also have grease traps that now need to be monitored. We have hotels that have things going on in them that we'd rather not. And these are the things you do as a town to ensure that safety of the people who are eating, staying, sleeping, they can be relied upon, and they're following the codes of our community. We had, unfortunately, several years ago, we had a fire at one of our lodging establishments here in town. And, that's certainly a wake-up call for all of us. But, this licensing, I think, is in conjunction with our new firefighters who will be working, under this with our code officer, is going to provide us an added layer of security and insurance that we're compliant, that these businesses are compliant with life safety code. And that's, it's not an onerous amount, but it's to make sure that people are safe. And I think it'll work well. There will be bugs, there will be wrinkles, but we will, under the able eye of our new code officer, I think we're going to be in a very good spot. And Orion's written a very good ordinance that's going to get us started. So, apart from that, I think we're obviously in the precipice of a new comp plan that will likely go to voters, depending upon the votes of the select board here in a couple weeks in June, and that will start a whole new round of incorporating the work of that comp plan. Orion has been working on that since before he actually was employed here full time, and he was simply a contractor working with us from McCog. And so that will start a whole new era in the first new comp plan in 20 years in Rockport, but also the implementation of what's within that comp plan. And a lot has changed in the last 20 years. So I'll talk about that. I suppose we probably should talk a little bit about the Route 90 multi-use path and multimodal project from Pascal Ave in downtown that I cut. I mentioned that in the initial meeting a week ago of where that cut came from, what it results from. I'll just quickly go over, and Orion can back over what parts I leave out. But the VPI study, which was conducted last year and resulted in several recommendations to the town. That group's effort was two-pronged. One was largely to focus on the area from Pascal Avenue intersection with Route 1, along Pascal Ave, across the bridge, across Main Street, Central Street, past here, up the hill, Union Street, and then ending just past Hughes Street at Grafham's. And then a second prong, which is effectively out West Street and a multi-use path to connect with the schools. And Ryan can talk a little bit about this more, but both efforts were effectively viewed as very positively from Maine DOT. They want to pursue that. They want to see funding at the federal level for this project at both ends of that project, and that requires a match. And so this is one stage of what we thought that match would be, but that we believe that match is about a 10% number in total, a 10% number of the total project, which is about $1 million-ish, maybe a little less. That number we had discussed. $1 million is the match. The match is our cost, right? So we had discussed a number of different efforts, and we talked about this under debt the first night, that we put under that amount only, or initially I'd put in the amount only to cover our cost of that borrowing, but I ended up removing that amount. So there's no cost in here that requires our match. If that's a project that so moves the town or so moves the federal government, I don't know what moves the federal government, but if that so moves the federal government, then that will be a new conversation. There would have to be, under either circumstance, a vote would be required of the town to borrow money like that. So it's the concept of it, the idea of it are within this budget and discussed in this department budget, but there's no funds under my budget to go towards it. So I think it's an excellent opportunity, and maybe if possibly it's a great thing to talk about, but it's not in here. And, but obviously, this is a project that has great support amongst the members of the VPI committee. It goes hand in hand with the new bridge that will happen at some point. And so this is something that requires further conversation as we move ahead. But again, where the federal government is tomorrow, as opposed to today, as opposed to next week, that's a very different conversation.
Yeah, and throughout the VPI process, I know Doug might want to weigh in as well, but, you know, the whole point of it was that there were going to be grants available to do the work that was scoped out in the VPI project. We got very favorable comments back from DOT that they really loved this project. They wanted to find funding for the entire project, but everything's changed.
Ryan, so this money, was this the money that Ian has been talking to you about? So the other night the other day at the Bridge Committee meeting?
Correct, and for those that don't know, Ian's with Maine DOT. Correct, so.
So that's
both-
all old news that you presented?
What I talked about at the task force meeting?
No, Ian's, you were gonna present some information from Ian about possible funding sources.
That's what this is.
Okay.
Yep.
So that's gone.
No. This is for, I guess fiscal year '26. So we're queuing things up for the next round of requests.
What do we have for this year's requests?
For this project, for the traffic infrastructure, is zero.
Yeah.
Zero for the traffic infrastructure study.
So last year, the CDS request came in the spring.
Yeah.
So we weren't even done with the VPI
Right,
effort at that point. So this would be the next round, and it was the requests that came in last spring that were part of, at some point, the Appropriations Committee's docket to approve, and it seems were stripped from the bill, where it was a couple weeks ago when that final package came through Congress.
Yeah.
So, again, who knows? It's a legislative process at work, but I think that we're leaning on, there's a great confidence in DOT's side of things that they believe there's great interest that this could be successful. But I think there's a lot, given the total picture of this budget, I didn't feel certain to be able to put that money forward and include that in at this time. But the ability for the town and the select board tomorrow to say, we need a special town meeting to consider this, that occurs, that's possible.
If we get the money, the federal money.
Now that this is gone.
It's, it's very discouraging. It was actually 2 years ago, I think, that we finished this. We had a committee, a task force that worked for at least a year, put in a lot of time, effort. Let's do this, and the MDOT will help us find money. 2 years on now, we don't have a dime, there's no work being done, and is this just gonna die and slowly fade away into the dark,
Well, we're a victim of, at least, if you
Yeah.
read the newspapers, there's
But I know,
lots of
but I
things
see
have
the same
changed.
thing happening with the Harbor Resiliency Committee. We'll pay $60,000 to these people, they'll come up with a lovely plan, and then they'll say goodbye, and meanwhile, myself and whoever else is here, has burned up, all their time and with no grant money to show for it, thanks very much.
I don't know who could have predicted.
No, I get it.
We
just
did the right
venting.
work. We've got great advocates at DOT. And there are some things we could do. There's a lot of just paint, a lot of striping and changing road configurations that were in that plan that
Yeah,
are
but
not.
that's MDOT still. They pay for the paint, and, because it's a, what do they call it, a state-controlled road?
Yeah, state aid road.
Yeah. Well, for budget purposes,
Yeah.
I think it makes sense that we're not putting money in the budget for something that we now understand is not currently available. So we'll keep an eye on that and write your senator.
I thought I understood, but I don't know if I do now. Is it that all that project, what Doug's talking about, is it just delayed a year? And it's hopeful because the Department of Transportation likes it?
No, okay. It's not as dire. It's not as dire as I think the picture. I disagree with Doug 100% on that because I think these plans are what you need because whether you take a small piece of that plan and run with it for $20,000 or you take the whole thing for $9 million and run with it, you need a plan to get from A to B because if you start working in the middle, it's like working on a house. You don't start in the middle. You don't start painting a room right in the middle and then work your way, create yourself in a corner. This is a situation where there were assurances made to groups through the CDS process, which is
Congressionally directed spending.
right. Yeah. So they applied last spring. It's in the budget, but anything's an act of Congress. So whatever that means. So these groups that were applying through last year, there was a wharf in Friendship, there's auditorium at Rockland High School, a number of different things that were stripped out of the budget last minute. Okay, so there's a new dynamic that's going on at the federal level, right? And how does that play itself out? How does that impact congressionally directed spending? How does it impact? We have the senior senator from Maine is the chairperson of the Appropriations Committee in the Senate. So that would generally give you reason to think there's great sway in Maine projects. Well, there's a new world going on, and so we are working with that. That doesn't mean the plan was, in my opinion, was a waste of time. I think the plan puts us in a great place. It's a question of this funding mechanism for that would potentially capture all of those issues at once. That's all. That's all we're talking about. That doesn't mean the ideas couldn't be pulled in.
Yeah, the plan is great.
Yeah.
I wrote it. Yeah. But what I'm disappointed about.
The contractor might disagree,
That explains why Congress has taken no action.
I just feel like it's sort of a bait and switch. The plan is great, but.
Well, I think the whole country might be feeling bait and switch, but we don't need to get into that. I think.
My only practical question is it's something that will go to congressionally directed spending again to be included sometime.
And our senator's up for re-election, and this may be more important to her next year. I also think, it allowed, when the bridge, I think one of the big wins is that DOT's bridge plans are going to include a second sidewalk, so both sides of the bridge can be walked down. And the plan that we aren't yet able to fund, will include sidewalks that come up from both sides of the bridge and bring people to downtown, and that's all great. But the good news is the bridge, which is all funded by DOT, is going to be a much better bridge. People will be able to walk on the sort of view side of the bridge in a way they've never been able to, so.
Without getting run over.
Right, yeah, that's true. People do walk over there, but it's very scary.
So just a general conceptual recap. We're gonna get a new bridge. State Department of Transportation, highly involved, great, okay. But it's the VPI projects that are questionable, but do I understand that the Department of Transportation liked the concept of all of that?
Yeah.
And then they wanted to kind of pull it together under their umbrella?
Yes.
So just to add, so I've got two line items here because I had two separate grants out there through Maine DOT and another request. They liked the project so much they didn't want to piecemeal it out and have like multiple different grants. They wanted to consolidate it and be one grant. So that was their move to do. So I don't have anything to suggest that the requests are not going to be in good standings, but as mentioned, we don't know how things are going to go.
And the timing is just different than what we thought.
Okay, so it's the timing, so we're still pursuing it?
Yeah.
But it's just the timing?
Sure.
I just wanted to make sure I didn't give the wrong impression that we're like, oh, that's it.
No.
That's Doug's view, but
I know. I don't understand it, because John's hanging crepe over there.
I don't even know what we're talking about. Doug.
Okay, can we go back to?
Yeah, John.
Yeah.
All right, or planning, I'm sorry. Orion, I have a couple questions.
Go for it.
It seems to be in the narrative up front that you're saying, on the one hand, that the growing number of permit applications, you indicate a growing number, but then your next page, you're saying you're down. So is that a?
Oh, maybe it's a typo. So if you look at our data, the permit number total, that's going down, but the revenue is going up.
Right.
That's what I was saying. So, and to allude to that, so before I started here, it was a different permitting software, a different program, and multiple different permits were going out for same project. So we kind of were looking at it from a FOAble perspective, a legal perspective, and just a project management perspective. So we consolidated it down. So revenue-wise, it's going up. Everything's looking good. Permit number-wise, it's going down just from a managerial office keeping standpoint.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
Just noticed in some of these charts that the average for fiscal year 24, 25, it's not calculating correctly because it's going for the whole 12 months. Megan, you might want to just look at that. The other question, we got this nice spike in revenue from a solar farm. Is that just one solar farm?
That's just one solar farm.
So how much revenue did that solar farm?
That was 100 and something thousand, I forget.
So it seems like we should be looking for more solar farms.
There's a.
I'm just saying,
From a revenue standpoint, yeah. Space standpoint, and then it's CMP power lines where they can tie in. There's a limitation to where they can go.
Yeah.
But yes.
So this is the one out there by Grassy Pond? Macy's, I'm sorry, Macy's, yeah.
Yeah, I forget which one. It's the newest one. I think it's across
Just off
from Macy's.
17 on the left side going
First
up.
one on the left.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's on north of 17. So there's the south side of 17, north side of 17. The south side 17 was the reason for the ordinance and why they got created.
Yes.
And there wasn't a fee associated with that at that time. And then the next one got the fee.
Gotcha. Okay.
Okay,
Can I ask a follow-up question about the permits?
sure.
Because the staff, again, a new guy question, the staffing's gone up over time for this department. If you've been able to achieve efficiencies with permitting, then hasn't that created efficiencies in the office?
It has created efficiencies in the office. Yeah, so before there was a lot of paper-based solutions. So we've got a new digital software called GovPilot that we pay for that has simplified the connections with the assessing departments. They have immediate access once permits are reached that stage for their review, and then in our review and inspection and enforcement.
One of the biggest changes from like 21, 22 to 22, 23 is that we used to contract out our planner services to Midcoast Council of Governments. We ended that contract and brought a full-time planner in instead of getting part-time service.
And that's, for instance, 21, 22, we show a $65,000 item. Is that the? under,
Right, that was
30,
the,
60, miscellaneous
yes,
professional
that was the
services.
contract.
Okay.
Yeah, looking at the staffing at the bottom of page 121, so it's one part-time, 7/10 of a full-time, then the next year in 23 it was 3 full-time, then it was 3 full-time and 2 part-time, and then 3 full-time and 2 part-time in 25, and now we're back to 3 full-time in 26 budget.
Yeah, and who were the 2 part-timers?
It was, I had a recording secretary for the planning board.
And we had an alternate code officer.
Oh, yeah,
Oh, with
and an
Andrew,
alternate
'cause
code officer.
Scott and Andrew were both.
That's what those were.
Okay. And this is where the position we talked about earlier, where the 3, it includes you, Andrew, and then this vacant position
Correct.
that you're trying to fill now that's going to be half town clerk, half
Correct.
planning. So you'll really be 2.5.
Yeah, I guess so.
So the staffing above this, where it says staffing level, says this budget aims at adding a part-time alternate code enforcer to assist in the growing number of permit applications in Nashville County.
So what we're looking at with a couple municipalities is it's a no-cost share. So a couple of these arrangements exist where whenever our code enforcement officer's out, that code enforcement officer can come in to do certain inspections.
Regionalization.
That's right.
To a degree, it's mainly with building codes and inspections of septic systems, just to keep those projects moving. Yep,
So,
you'll do it.
You'll take the job.
Code enforcement in Hope and Washington.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Happy to help.
We'll chat.
That's great.
so the other thing I'd like to look at, or I was impressed with, Orion, was the grant application chart, which, these are all grants that we've applied for since you came on staff. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
correct. Hold on, I was making a note. Let me go to that page real quick.
Yeah, what page
Page
are you on, John?
131.
Yes.
You know, that, you brought in $4.6 million.
One of those, that's the ARPA through DEP. That was a group contribution. Woodward and Kern did the heavy lifting on that. Megan did a lot of work, and I did some work as well. Just wasn't included anywhere, so it got housed here. But yes.
Well, still, it's
And you don't get to put
millions
it
of
under
dollars
revenue.
that are.
No, I've
Yeah.
been trying to find a way to get
So I just,
some of this into there.
and the success rate and what, you know, from what you've applied for to what you've received, I mean, I just want to emphasize that, you know, that
Yep.
you're not getting credit for the revenue, but there's a lot here.
There's a lot there.
Yep.
There's a
And
lot
then,
there.
I do have a little nitty-gritty question. So, line RO 205 and RO 208, it looks like we're allocating wages to the wastewater budget.
This is just for the code enforcement
Yeah,
officer.
well, local plumbing inspector.
Yes.
Or the
But-
RO 205, but
But the
RO 208.
So my question is, then we give the inspection fees back to the town. So the wastewater budget is paying to have the inspection and then not getting the revenue on the wastewater budget? Is that,
I think it's more, what was it, to offset their time dedicated towards it?
It is, but I think John's driving the saying that it's a one-way street. in terms
Oh,
of
I
the
see,
rev-
I see,
we're-
yeah,
we're-
yeah.
We're pulling revenue, but we're not correspondingly having the revenue of those inspection fees come with it, right? That's-
Right.
You're
that's your
doing the
question.
work, you're not getting the benefit of the
yeah,
work.
it
Yeah.
seems like, and,
Right.
yeah, it's double dipping a little bit. So, on wastewater.
So that, just
It
to
seems
clarify.
like the fees should stay with wastewater if they're paying for the inspection, you know, the time to inspect the system.
The majority
let's
of those
understand.
fees are
Yeah.
normal plumbing fees, because the only time
Yeah,
there's a
exactly.
wastewater inspection is when there's a new connection.
So what is a fee for a wastewater inspection typically? I mean,
I'd have to look at the fee schedule to tell you exactly.
well, the total amount here is $9,500.
Yeah.
Is it a big portion of that or
No.
just a very small portion?
Very small.
That's the
Alright.
wastewater one, not the.
Okay,
plumbing.
so
Yeah.
it's mostly plumbing inspection.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yep.
Charging
Yeah.
for. Okay. Well, it did kind of look funny that way. though.
Yeah.
So,
And then-
how much of the code enforcement or what, in the wages and benefits coming from wastewater, what is it in here? What exactly is it?
So are you looking
Clar-
now
clarif-
at R0208, or are you
Yeah.
still? Yeah, so the 14715.
Yeah, the 14.7, who is that and what portion?
For the code enforcement officer / local plumbing inspector. And I don't remember what the percentage is. But
Of
I
the
think it
salary.
was included in that sheet that I sent you guys with all the wage and benefit information on it. Yes.
Right here, 14, it just says code enforcement officer 14713.
So 10%. So the green line corresponds to here.
So that's 10% of the code enforcement's rate.
But is it 10% of the activity wastewater related?
Well, I was,
You
yeah,
just said it was a very small portion of the fees, so,
well, so there's
I'm not
two lines,
understanding
right?
your
We've got the
question, John.
fees, which are R0205, that's the $9,500.
yeah,
That's what I was understanding was the very
I'm-
small.
Okay, yeah, so John, which line are you talking about? R0205?
Well, first we said that the amount of wastewater inspections is relatively minor.
Right.
And then we're assigning 10% of somebody's salary to
To the
wastewater.
wastewater, yes.
Well,
Doesn't
so I was
sound
wondering
minor.
whether it would be your time, because you're working on all that development, expansion of the sewer system.
So
infill.
so if we look at fiscal year 24-25, the 36,550 in line R208,
Right.
that includes my time in that, as well as the local plumbing inspector. So John opted to take my time out of that one.
Okay, so this 14,715 is only.
Correct, that's local plumbing inspector in
And what's the
association with the
rationale for
wastewater
that?
budget.
What-
Well, they have to deal with, so that's the sewer tie-in inspections.
Okay.
So that's predominantly that, and then any inspections they do within that structure associated with sewer tie-in.
And is that related to what we just said was a very small fee up in?
The 950 plumbing and wastewater inspection fees, that has to do with anything
So that's
else. It's not necessarily associated with the wastewater budget per se, so that's if you have a septic system. I don't
So
think
there
that's a
could be
separate one.
a larger universe of these sewer tie-in fees
That stays
are
in the
not
wastewater
reflected here
budget.
at all.
Stays in, okay, that makes sense.
Okay,
That makes sense.
okay, so there's,
And, you know,
Said that right.
10% seems like a lot. I mean, how many people, how many incidences of sewer tie-ins in a given year do we really experience?
I'd have to pull that data.
I
I
think
don't,
Route 1, that expansion, that I understand is getting busy.
The infill expansion are you
The
talking about?
infill, but the Route 1, when we did the Route 1 expansion a couple of years ago, that's starting
yeah,
to sort of,
that's starting to get a few on there.
yeah.
Yeah,
And we're not including any of your time, which is, I'm sure there's a piece of it, and I'm not arguing we should include it, but it is, it's working on that whole infill project, and that's out there getting grants out there. I mean, that's $1 million grant that Orion was able to get to fund that. Okay. Helen?
Well,
What's the purpose of line 3050?
That was funny.
Medical exams?
oh,
Hearing exams,
What-
but.
yeah, that was hearing exams.
3050.
And there's a few departments that have those and
Yep.
and others that don't, so.
That was a
it's-
hearing exam, Megan.
Correct.
Yeah.
Because our code enforcement officer goes on construction sites for BLS standard, Bureau of Labor standards, we are required to have them hearing tested annually.
Thank you.
Safety is no.
Can you hear me now?
That's right.
I'm gonna pretend I didn't hear that.
Clay's got his hearing protection on right now. He's,
I'm
ready.
wearing them bad boys to bed.
things get out of control in here. He's ready, so.
Listen, you won't be making fun of him when he's 70.
That's
And
right.
he's the only one who
He'll
can
have
hear.
his hearing.
He'll hear every word.
That's right.
He ain't making it 70.
So, before we finish, I just want to say again, Ryan, I think it was, you're doing a great job in terms of, like, the impact you're having here, so I just
thank
want
you.
to put an exclamation mark on that.
Appreciate that.
And we have a comprehensive plan that I think is going to be on the ballot, so.
Hopefully, fingers crossed.
Back at the top really quickly, I don't think I heard it. We have no part-time people this coming year?
Correct, yeah.
And wages are still up 8% year over year. That's like step changes and such.
It is.
Cool, thank you.
And let's see. All right, anything else for Orion? Okay. Next is finance with Megan,
See ya.
page 133. I guess that's it, Orion. Thank you
Thank
very
you,
much.
Orion.
Thanks, Orion. See ya.
133.
Toy station.
Yeah, see you Thursday.
All right. Anything either of you want to say say, or do we go right to questions?
The biggest change here is a reduction in estimated interest on our depository accounts. In the last 8 to 9 months, we've had 3 reductions in our interest rate, and I presume that that will just continue to keep going down, so.
What's our interest rate right now? 4%.
4.2, I think.
Yeah, it was sort of nice while it was happening. But even so, at 105 for the year to date, I mean.
We had 4 months at over 6% and then had reductions pretty rapidly after that.
Yeah.
And that happened at the time our deposit accounts were at their highest levels too, so.
Good for us.
Right?
Yep. Get the timing right. Yep.
Sure is.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Walker.
Is the average balance of that account pretty stable over time, or is it a function
No,
of?
it fluctuates
Yeah, I mean,
a lot.
over year, sorry, now, I'm sure throughout the year, but.
Yes,
like-
by the time we end the fiscal year, it's roughly about the same
similar
every
time.
year. Yep.
Because I see, like, even back in '22, 156,000, which I guess was the start of the interest rate
Yes.
bonanza, but.
Sure was.
Yeah, you compare the difference when it was 16,000 and then
Right.
55.
Megan, can you, on 3040, the bonding fees?
Yeah, so, we have to, get bond counsel for any time we do a bond issue, or we do a lease purchase agreement for something over $100,000.
Okay.
So we will have a bond issue for the stream crossing projects. We'll also have a bond anticipation note process for that as
Okay.
well. So
So that will drive up
basically,
that
we get hit
cost.
twice for that process.
Okay.
And then the wastewater allocation here looks like it's
10%.
10% for you and then 6%.
6%
for,
for the
Colleen.
finance clerk. Yeah.
I just had a question historically, Megan, what happened in fiscal year 23, 24 that bumped everything so much? Did you get?
Carrie and I went from having a shared assistant to each having separate help. So he now has an assistant assessor and I have a finance clerk.
Okay. Congratulations on all your awards for putting together.
Yes.
Thank you.
Other questions for Megan? All right, well, you do a great job. You always have the answers when we need them, and that gives us a lot of confidence in the work you're doing. So, thank you.
And thank you for the.
Plus, you make a mean macaroni
And
and
the
cheese. And meatballs. All right, next is other public safety services, page 193.
Street lights, traffic lights, fire hydrants.
And that's you, John.
Yeah, this is our streetlights, our hydrants, this is sort of this is the one size fits all column because it doesn't fit in anywhere else.
And I guess we heard the other night, I mean, hydrants, I guess, there's just a price for those. And it's actually to our benefit in some ways for fire protection
Yeah.
to expand locations of
Right.
hydrants.
Right.
I just was curious why the Route 90 Meadow Street, we don't get reimbursed for that or revenues for that versus the other two?
There's no, so the other two were put in my understanding, it's well before my time,
Nope,
but
Yeah.
that was right.
my understanding is the other two lights were put in based on business needs and increased traffic because of those businesses. The Meadow Street traffic light was not put in for that reason,
Right.
so there's no business to charge for that.
Oh, and that's where this revenue comes from. It's like
Correct.
Penn
Who
Bay.
pays,
So,
who
Home-
pays that?
Home Depot pays,
Okay,
Kennebec Pharmacy, and Penn Bay Medical Center.
good. Did not know that. Another thing I've learned tonight.
Yeah, and did we just decide it'd be nice to have a
Yeah.
traffic light at
We had a
Meadow
lot,
Street?
yeah, we had a lot of accidents there, and there was a large hue and cry in the community that we needed to deal with that issue.
Right
So,
at Route 90 Meadow.
Yeah, and so that was, there were constant requests to have DOT place a light there, and they paid for it, but,
We paid for the upkeep
electricity.
and the upkeep.
yeah. So,
Cross Street thanks you for routing the high schools down our street instead.
exactly, yeah,
I
yes.
appreciate that.
We have to pave it again as a result,
Yeah,
it's
well,
crazy.
That keeps it- Good, and streetlights, eventually that's gonna go away?
Yes.
Yes. I think one more year after this.
That'll be great. Any questions for this category?
I'm sorry, did I miss something? The streetlights were the capital outlay item, is that it?
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
sorry.
Long-term investment. All right, next is Town Office Building, page 289. John, again, you got to open this, and now you're gonna end it.
Oh, boy. It's a similar story as you've seen in the other building budgets. It's really not a whole lot different here. You know, certainly there are other items in this budget because, you know, we work out of this building, you know, use of computer reserve, purchasing computers. It's a little bit more of an active spot. But in large part, we're looking at, you know, a building that's in high use, maximum use. Every corner of this building's used, so it's, you know, for everything from pest services to carpets, that's a building that's in high demand and a high function all week long. And this building is also among those that will be looked at in terms of where does it fit, where is it going, do we have the right amount of space, so forth.
So, number 3090, what is miscellaneous contract?
Speaking of pest services,
Ah,
yes. We had, the first year I was here, we had pests here, we had pests in that building, we had, and really the only solution was a contract with a service to get rid of it, so.
It also covers our, like carpet cleaning contract, like the ones when you walk in the door. We have
UniFirst or
a, yes,
UniFirst,
UniFirst.
that's who it is.
They come pull them out and replace them.
Yep.
and
we're
that's
talking
going
about-
up so much from the 7624 to the 19,000, just because that's what
What
the
they
contracts
promise.
are that they're gonna
Yeah.
charge us.
So we're talking about mice or?
Mice,
rats?
well,
Well, maybe both.
mice, rats.
Here, it was something larger than a, would they put it larger than a squirrel?
Yeah, something, no, raccoon.
Coyote.
Raccoon?
I don't know.
Something larger than
It
raccoon?
was horrifying.
It was big.
Yeah.
That's good eating.
It's long, it's
Don't
long
eat
gone
the
before
sloppy
Walker moved to
joes
town.
at
You're
the
safe,
barbecue.
buddy.
That was the meatballs.
What's
Yeah,
What's
we
the,
saved $100 there.
what's the increase in web hosting and design, the 3026?
Yeah.
Looks like we're going from
Says-
3,100 to
Changing
10,000.
platform,
What's
changing
that?
website, right?
Are we gonna have to stay on the government issue
I-
stuff?
Lord willing, no.
Oh, so we're
We
going
can move
to,
on.
to a different,
We're
Not
trying to do
move on,
something with our
.org.
a
website.
different
Okay,
CMS.
all right, thank you.
Different CMS.
Yeah, different, right. This is, you know, we need to,
Megan can answer.
Yes.
sorry.
Doing so. Don't estimate.
Yeah, okay, we're trying to do something with the website, that's why we've got an
We're
increase.
trying, right.
Okay,
There's
all right,
we need a platform.
okay, Thank you.
stand on.
Sweet.
So I see we've got this reference, the only reference I see to the solar power, the 7572 solar power reserve, which we're not adding to. I know we've got a 39,000 reserve on that. But we have solar panels, and there's like this lore that somehow we're supposed to be getting an
making money.
offset to our, yeah.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
We have to purchase the panels.
We
So
haven't done
however
that?
that agreement was done, we need to purchase the panels and then we'll start receiving the benefit of whatever those
So what do
panels
the
are
panels
producing.
cost to purchase?
What we have in the reserve.
So why don't we purchase them?
We went for, is it 7 years? We went for 7 years, and then we had the switch where we could purchase.
10.
10, okay. But I think that if I remember the original contract, we can't buy out inside of that 10 years.
And is the 10 years
We
not
are
up yet?
outside of the, yes,
So every year we don't, we're losing money.
correct.
Okay.
But we also
So-
don't own them, right? We also don't own them.
We will own them
But
once
we
we
have the money
purchase them
sitting
out
in
of the
reserve to buy
purchase.
them.
Right, but do we want to buy 10-year-old solar panels?
Yes.
Well, they're still good for at least
Another
another
15
10,
years.
15
Well,
years.
somebody can run the numbers anyway and figure out what they produce. Do we know what they produce?
Yeah, you should.
Dollar wise, it equates to just over $2,000 a quarter.
So 8,000 a
Eight
year.
a year.
So in 5 years, you would have paid them back.
In the summer, obviously, it's more than that, but I would say it probably averages.
Yeah. Who would, I know Mark Van Balen tried to he wanted to take this on as a project to sort out the solar panels. And it'd be helpful to the select board, I think, to have somebody figure this out. Who
I
would
think
he
Bill
talk to?
Bowe was working on it
Yeah,
at
Bill
one
was
point.
working on it.
And is Bill, because Mark said he couldn't get any information, but Bill, is Bill working on this?
I know he has the contracts and everything.
I wouldn't
Okay.
say he's actively working on it. I was texting him about the data sonde, but we were that was a different,
That was the
that was
other
an hour ago, so.
Okay, well, I mean, this is
yeah.
another example of something, we'll just put it on our list.
Right.
and-
Yep.
What was that about? Doing,
The data
breaking up stuff
center.
about, no, the solar panels?
The solar panels, so there's solar panels at the town office.
Okay, yeah.
And apparently CMP just gets the total benefit of those,
No, Revision
No,
Energy
Revision,
does.
yeah.
or revision.
Revision, they get the,
Well,
they-
somebody, not us, gets the benefit
But until
having them
10
on our
years,
roof.
until 10 years,
until we
so-
buy them.
Yeah.
Right.
And we have the money sitting in our reserve account to buy them. And now the time has passed, so we could buy them. Jeff, were you on the board when
Yeah.
the first decision was made? So I guess the thinking was at that time, they would still be valuable at the end of the 10
Absolutely,
years.
absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think in the contract, it says that they will be putting out, it has a guarantee of 94% at 25-year mark. So,
Okay.
you know,
At the 25-year mark, and we're just
Yeah.
a little past 10, maybe?
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
So who bought them?
So there were IRS tax credits that companies could get for putting solar panels on buildings at the time that we did it. And because we're a municipality, we weren't eligible for those credits. So Revision Energy at the time was doing agreements with municipalities to basically upfront the capital cost of putting the solar panels on the building and setting the building up for them. They would receive the tax incentive credit and they would just bill us for whatever those panels produce that we were using for electricity.
but now we can buy them?
Correct.
Okay, because we're past the time limit or
Correct.
restriction, okay.
And we have the money sitting in reserve,
But
so
what were you saying about Bilbo?
he has the the contracts and stuff.
Contract.
He's
Oh,
certainly working,
just reviewing that?
reviewing
Okay.
it so that somebody can come to the select board with information.
Okay.
Since we're not experts, I mean, we can learn, but it sounds like at a very high level, it would be a smart decision. But we'll get more information,
Thank you.
have it at a meeting.
Well, they're 10 years old, so they should be discounted, right?
That's why they're only 36,000. There was some sort of, from what I understand, there's some sort of like sliding scale in the contract that we signed with them.
So
for
the
what
longer
the
we take
purchase-
to buy them, the price goes down?
I believe so, but I'm not 100% sure.
yeah, there was an amortization schedule in there that I recall.
But if they're kicking off 8,000 to 10,000 a year, starts to be real money. That could pay for the food budget.
That's the food cost.
Rich budget.
I'm not gonna talk about how every room has a budget for food. Any other questions on the town office?
Are the computer equipment, 7315, is that just like office laptops and printers and such? Is there any bigger ticket items in there?
It doesn't include printers, it's
Okay.
just desktops and laptops for all of our departments.
Sure.
So like, the police department doesn't have their own budget, the fire department, it's all included here.
Right.
Not like food.
How often do you replace?
Every 5 years.
Okay. Seems like a lot to me, but I
Fre-
guess not
Too
crazy.
frequent, you think?
Well, no, I think 5 years is about the right. It seems like expensive per unit, maybe a little bit, but
And then
I'm sure
we-
some of them are more expensive than others.
We replace our server every
Okay,
10 to 15-ish years, depending on performance.
Have you considered not having a server?
Yes.
Love it.
Cloud.
Yeah.
I actually talked with our IT provider, our IT folks. Yes, yeah, wizard. Yeah, Gus is a wizard. It's largely what drives us to have a server is the central software that we run that really runs Megan's World, aside from Excel.
Sure.
There's this program called Trio. For those who've been around, you've heard that phrase before. And it runs all of our point of sale. And it is, much like every other program you've ever heard of that runs in these environments, it's antiquated, it doesn't work, they don't support it well. Tell me if you heard this before, right?
Yeah.
So, in short, we're looking at options, and that's actually something that Megan and I are gonna talk about here. We have our own list, actually, of things but next fall, looking at, is there other potential avenues to move off of Trio? And if we did, that would lessen our server needs and allow us to go more cloud-based and so forth. So,
Well, if you have less on-premise, you can maybe reconsider that West Rockport Fire Station internet line
yes,
too.
100%. Yeah, no, that's very true. Very true.
Then the
Yeah.
only other encouragement I was going to add is one I offer to my company all the time is to review those internet subscriptions regularly.
Good idea.
It's not uncommon to go a quarter and save $1,000 a month because people are, have subscriptions hanging out. They have just haven't. They don't need 10 seats. They need 2.
That's right. Yes.
It's an easy way to. It makes me happy on a Monday, in April, to just go through and nix a whole bunch of subscriptions.
We
Maybe you
actually-
can get the same benefit.
We review those frequently to make sure that we're not paying for Microsoft licenses and Adobe licenses for people that aren't here.
Yep.
So we try to keep a
You
good
probably have
handle
a slightly
on-
more controlled crew than I'm dealing with.
Probably.
Who knows?
There's a few of us.
She has a bit of whip than you.
They're so expensive. I mean, to buy an Adobe license for it's eye popping. Like just one seat is so. It's easy to move quickly when you say, whoa, that person's gone, and pull that back. So, but no, that's a great idea. Thanks. Yeah.
All right. Anything else on the town office building? Okay. That's it. I guess we're done.
That's it.
That's it.
For now.
Until,
I had actually one question about
Go ahead,
that,
John.
that I wanted to just see if we have an answer to. It's with Midcoast Solid Waste. Who's involved with that? Michael? Are they working on a reserve for transition to when the landfill finally has to shut down?
I don't know all the details.
I gotta believe they're thinking about it.
Yeah,
They've
that's
got
a
a
big.
big,
Okay.
I think there's $2 million right now in reserve for the closure of the landfill. The estimate, I think, the last time I saw was $7 million for closure. But of course, the other part of closure is the perpetual pumping and treatment of the water that comes out of the quarry. So there's arguments made on both sides of that. But the board was putting aside $100,000 a year for about 15, 20 years. That's really where the $2 million number came from. you know, when we get to that point, obviously there'll be a great influx that we'll need to put into capping and, you know, basically what we've seen in Rockland. Same, very, very similar effort, where you'll see them, you know, bulldozers on the sides of the hills, you know, building grass and so forth. But that will be coming our way. At this point, the operations, I don't think Dave St. Laurent, who was the manager of that facility, or the board are pushing, as Rockland did, to try to hurry closure. As Rockland really wanted to get that capped and closed. I think the ability to continue to operate out of that quarry and allow for construction, demolition debris to be deposited there, there's still a revenue stream that they want to keep alive. But that long-term has been, in that board's view, for a very, very long time, thankfully, for us all.
And as I understand, they're also, it's got a longer life than they thought it would.
Yep.
Because of the way more stuff going to recycling and the way they're just doing things. They're actually utilizing it better than it used to be used.
Yes.
Which
And it
helps
settles.
us all.
It settles. It settles all the time. When I joined that board 20 years ago, they said there was 5 to 7 years of life left in that quarry. And I think I asked Alice, speaking of Allison, I asked her and she said, "What's the latest record?" She said, "I think it's 5 to 7 years." So, you know, it just, as long as it's 5 to 7 years away, we're all safe.
We can always keep them out.
Right.
John, can I ask you another new guy question about
Sure.
the process, what Monday looks like? for
Yeah.
the Budget Committee.
Good question. Yeah. So usually with that, so just to, I'll recap what the outcome of that meeting should be a series, it might be 1, it might be 5, it might be 500 votes of the Budget Committee for recommendations of changes they'd like to see the Select Board make in the budget, that the Select Board will then consider a week later. And just to give a sense of like what that looks like, so the budget will say, you know, it'll be laid out with the question in terms of what that
The
is.
recommendation,
And that recommendation of, you know, Budget Committee recommended $500 cut to assessing, you know, whatever it was. You know, board made the change, or Select Board, you know, accepted the
Yep,
change.
yep, I've seen it.
And so, you know, you'll go through that list. It's not an overall on the budget. We like the whole budget. We don't like the whole budget. It's not department. We like this department. We don't like that department. It's specific recommendations that can affect the board and their deliberations a week later. And then we as I said, we take those and we put them on the ballot. So the residents know what the work was and what those recommendations were. So.
But it's not a line by line, right? It's like you said, assessing,
Yeah.
the assessing budget by $500.
Yeah, it's right. I mean,
Even though during your discussion, you say, well, this item,
yeah, I mean, Liz isn't here, but obviously we want to print one ballot, right? So,
Right.
you know, we would, you know, try to condense that to we'll try to put that on a line in the ballot so it's clear what the intent of the Budget Committee was in their process, that there was a change, there was a dollar amount, that's what that is. But we may try to consolidate it so that way we don't have a 5-page ballot. You know, if there were a lot of recommendations or not, we don't want to.
Well, but I
Make
think the
that-
select board
so-
would want a specific one. I mean, if you just say
Sure.
reduce assessing by 500,
Right.
what do we do with that?
I-
mean,
right.
I'd rather have, I think we need,
Yeah, I'm just saying, I don't
Okay,
want
yeah,
the Budget Committee to say, well, that's, you know, we hit a comma here, we had a period here, that, we may want to.
Or feel like we need to start on page 1 and okay.
And
let's
go
move
through
to
every
page 2.
line.
Right.
Yeah, no,
Right.
I get that. I
Yeah.
think it's more, I think the question for me is it more guidance for, hey, Select Board, you really need to take another look at this? Or is it, we've looked at this and we think this is the action you should take on this?
Yeah.
It's
I think it's more
that.
the
Yeah,
latter
it's
than
the latter.
the former.
yeah.
But I would say, I would expect some members of the board, maybe all will attend.
Okay.
So they can hear that message. Of course, it's the majority of the Budget Committee that, you know, so 5 votes carries the day. You know, in moments where not all attend, there would sometimes be a letter from the chair that would go to the select board to say, okay, this is what our action was. And that could be more explanatory than,
Right.
you know, a very dry statement which might be on a ballot.
And the recommendations that we end up putting forth for the select board will be more or less voted on by the budget committee on that meeting on Monday. So someone will be making a motion,
Yep.
second, discussion, take a vote, and that vote must pass to be able to make that recommendation.
Yep.
And then typically those votes also show up.
Right, budget committee recommends 5 to 1, or,
And does Megan give us sort of the menu of what we talked about, or?
No, that'll be led mostly by the budget
Are you?
committee chair.
Yeah.
Because that is a budget committee meeting.
Yeah.
Although they will be in attendance, maybe in attendance, because they wanna hear what we're talking about, and they wanna get the depth of the conversation, more than just a one-line recommendation.
Right, but not part of the discussion.
Right.
right.
More serious than it sounds at first, does the select board want to sit at an enlarged table situation, or do you want to be in the audience? And that's a question really for both chairs.
I mean, I don't really care, but it is a budget committee meeting, so.
Right.
I didn't
that's
mind
just-
being in the audience last
I think
last
that's
year.
how we did
Yeah,
it.
I mean,
Yeah.
the point
it
of it
consolidates
is-
the tables here closer for the budget.
Budget
committee.
committee
I
had
mean,
their
in my
table,
book,
we
the
sat
point
in the
of
audience.
the budget committee meeting is to, if we want a sole budget committee meeting, which is kind of the premise of our committee.
What, you don't like me,
To
Tim?
have a somewhat of a selective,
Well, yeah, why?
Conversation.
What would be the point of having
Right.
it?
so.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I know last year, but,
We were in the library, so it was maybe,
yeah, and it was tough. I mean, it was, yeah.
In terms of to the question of go back to page 1 or not, I mean, that's to go back to what we'd hoped is obviously is to call out the areas that were, okay, we want to come back here, we want to come back here. We didn't really do that, you know, through the last 4 meetings, which makes it difficult to do that. And, you know, because obviously you'd like to be able to say, okay, to not go page 1, okay, let's go to page 2, let's go, because that's invariably how it ends up, how it's been the last, I think, every budget we've ever been to, because it is difficult. The plus side of that is that because it's only been 2 weeks, it's a little bit fresher in everyone's mind, I think, in terms of the issues at play, and so hopefully it will be able to, the recall will be quick, because a lot of times, what did they say? And who
Well, that's
said
what I was,
That's
that's
the
what I
hard
was
part.
getting at, is
Yeah.
that we didn't have a real secretary, you know, making a note, you know, this was pretty hot discussion.
Yeah.
This- So, we're supposed to go through our books and look at our notes and,
Right, I mean, the point of our meeting is to come up with specific recommendations to make to the select
Yeah,
board. So
yeah.
if we, typically we do it just department by department through the book so that we can have somewhat of a structure, organization
Yeah,
for it.
yeah.
But
Yep.
go department by department, if no one, I mean, we could talk for weeks on end about everything, but if we're not coming up with solid recommendations,
go
it
on.
doesn't matter anyways.
Yeah, okay.
We're not providing them with any criteria to use for their decision making. So
Right.
if we get to a section and, you know, we want to add money to a reserve, if we want to cut a vehicle, then we can make those specific recommendations. But outside of that, we're trying to streamline our recommendations to the committee, because a couple of years ago, 3-4 years ago, whatever it was, there basically ended up being so much back and forth that we didn't have a direct transformation of information to the select board. So when our votes showed up, when the budget committee votes showed up on the ballot, basically no one knew what was going on. No one being the voter didn't actually have a good, clear picture of what the budget committee even did that year, that budget cycle.
Okay.
So it's still not a perfect system, but I think it at least nails down what the budget committee is trying to tell the select board to change.
how many feet of sidewalk and that kind of stuff.
Well,
That's what I remember from last year.
Well, but that's really the challenge. I mean, I'd like to
It
say
is.
that after 4 meetings over the course of 2 weeks, we can make reasoned, thoughtful recommendations 5 days from now on a $12 million budget. I mean, the process does not lend itself. And this isn't anything we can fix now, I realize, but it just doesn't lend itself to systemic level challenges, and like health insurance costs are all through this thing. You know, I mean, it's just,
Right.
it's hard to do those kind of bend the curve type things.
Yeah.
And not get bogged down in, okay, we're only gonna pave to the corner of whatever, and do that kind of stuff. That's what I have to wrestle with for the next few.
Yeah, and what realistically should happen is if we can staff a budget committee throughout the year, we should be having more meetings throughout the year.
I agree.
And getting more in depth, because we can't, I mean, let's look at a public works budget. None of us really sitting here, every one of us in the room, know that budget well enough to say, you really could cut that. You know, that, even like me when I was alluding to the hammer. Yeah. Maybe we're buying stuff that we don't need to buy, you know, that obviously that particular one is an opinion, but.
And this is a great.
If we can meet throughout the year more than now, I mean, the last 3 years, we've been having problems even getting a quorum at a meeting.
I know, this has been
So
an
this is the
extraordinary
first
group.
year that
Yeah.
we've even had 9 people, let alone
Yeah.
7 people.
Even 5.
Or 5.
Yeah, it was
Well,
pretty
there's-
slim last year.
Well,
And it could-
and not that I want this to be any thicker, nor do I want to put that big, but, I mean, there's just not enough information even in here.
Completely
to-
agree.
To do that, and
Which is if, like I was saying, if we can staff this
it's not performance
group
metrics,
throughout
there's
the
some,
year,
but they're not particularly good, and.
our meetings this week would be much, or the last 2 weeks would
Yeah.
be shorter also,
Right,
because
because
we're
you'd
not
be
asking.
far more
yeah.
informed.
But it gives
Well,
you an
and-
opportunity to, for a lot of these things that Denise has written down.
Right.
It's almost like we're too late for those now, right?
Those are
So,
for
you know,
next
those
year.
have
Yeah.
to now
Yeah.
be, those
Yeah,
have to be
exactly.
next
That's
year.
the problem we have to solve,
Right.
because
Yeah.
you can't.
Right.
And you know, on Monday, I mean, it's great to get the specific, I mean, there's a certain task that has to be done, which is to give us very specific recommendations. But in the course of that, health insurance, you know, form a task force to you know, however you want to phrase it, or explore regionalization, meet with county representatives. I mean,
Well,
Yeah.
is there?
you
there's
know, I
no-
have a list of that kind of thing, but
There's no requirement that our recommendation has to be to a specific department, is there? Can we make a recommendation about health insurance in this meeting?
no, well, I would suggest it's not helpful to us, because we
We
can't.
can't do anything about
We
it.
can't do anything.
Well, you don't know
But
that.
I think there is
Not
open
this year.
enrollment, right, or something, but wouldn't that be?
But maybe not for the budget process now. I mean, looking ahead, absolutely.
Well, no, I mean, I don't know, I think we change our health, I'm not honestly familiar.
Right,
with
but
munis- I
Megan,
mean,
between now
municipalities,
and, you know, we have a ballot that
In
will go, that has to be done by April.
I love it.
11.
Well, you approve it at your meeting in April.
Yeah.
And we can't go any later than that, because they're supposed to go to the printer.
Sure.
The Friday.
So-
But if we wanted to ask you to form a task force to look at regionalizing the police, when would our opportunity be, if not next Monday?
Oh, I think that's
Yeah.
that's what I was saying. I think that sort of thing would be helpful. But for the specific recommendations that fit within the charter that talks about what the budget committee's role is. And I'm not trying to cut the budget committee out from other roles, because I think it's absolutely helpful to have people with the broad background and experience you all have to work on these issues. But there's a very narrow task. First order is,
After we do that task, though,
yeah,
would that be a time to maybe say, you know,
I think it'd be.
please form a task force for
Yes.
health
Yeah,
insurance?
we
Yes,
recommend that,
yes.
yeah,
I think
that'd
the
be
challenge you
extraordinary.
run in is, we come to this budget meeting, and we're on such a tight time frame that there's no opportunity to explore anything now,
And we
which
come up-
means
yeah.
you almost have to go through, approve it, what have you, obviously make your changes, and then start it almost immediately. Like, what are the things we need to be doing for
Right,
next year?
and we in July set our priorities.
Right, but
for the
what I'm
year.
hearing is big changes or systemic level changes, cross-cutting changes are off the table for this budget, from the budget committee.
Yes.
I'm hearing that we should focus our efforts on pay from here to here, don't buy this car, don't buy that hammer, but the bigger stuff, don't even bother wasting our time.
Well, you can't-
Not so much that don't bother, more of, is it realistic too? You know, if we make a recommendation for them to change, on the budget, are they even going to be able to make that change by,
April 11th or whatever the date is.
yeah,
Well,
right?
it would, no, I don't think it has to be by April 11th, though. I mean, we can, we'll have this conversation on Monday. But, you know, I do know health insurance is something you offer plans every year. It doesn't need to take effect on April 1st or July 1st. It can
No,
take
but in
effect-
order to be in the budget, so it's.
Well, sure, but I, you know, as a budget committee member, have pretty good confidence we could find a way to spend less on healthcare.
Oh, yeah.
And so I.
Going
By July
forward.
1.
Well, within the budget, within the fiscal year.
Within the fiscal year.
Well, that's July 1 is when the fiscal
Well,
year.
no,
It doesn't-
I-
it doesn't need to
oh,
start
yeah,
July.
No, I'm sure we
Yeah,
could
it
find new
starts
plans.
Start June
That
30th.
start, you know, whenever open enrollment is, say.
I see what you said. So like, the budget number would be set, but if you can drop the numbers as the year's
Right.
going on,
Like
so we
mid-
come in
mid-year-
under budget
mid-year.
numbers.
Exactly,
Yeah.
like,
That'd be
this is
beautiful.
the target, like, I do
I see what you're
think
saying.
the health insurance costs seem astronomical to me. And I do think, and I, you know, I think it's, you know, this is a tight budget. There's, you know, nobody wants to cut things, you know, we want to give the extra patrol officer, you know, we want to have the extra clerk and everything. And health insurance seems like something that you could probably cut, and it'd be one of the least painful things to cut out of a budget.
So our
A lot
personnel
of people wouldn't
policy,
even notice.
And yeah, how we would capture that is we, basically, because our goal is only to change the actual spreadsheet, going forward. So our recommendation, basically, someone would make a motion to drop the expenditure
Right.
budget line
Yeah.
for insurance. So
Right.
that is, I think, something completely within the realm of
That's what
capturing.
That's what I'd be proposing, you know, this, the budget committee thinks we should not spend more than this on
Yeah,
healthcare, say.
and the select board
in
can,
this
throw-
coming
you know,
year.
can just ignore that if that's what
Well, they can, yeah.
But if, when it goes, I mean,
Well-
when it goes to the ballot, the whole point of what we're doing is, when we go to the ballot, you see
well,
someone that
sending
we
a
says,
would
signal
all
to
like to
town.
do what you're
Yeah.
saying. I guess I just want to make sure we're being realistic about what we're dealing with, that we have, you know, town employees who have certain expectations. Maybe we need to make changes to the personnel policy and give them some notice that we all of a sudden don't think that family coverage for every employee
Is
is
gonna be
appropriate,
covered,
or,
I mean, I
But
don't
if
think we're
we-
making, we're not making those specific things. I think you can,
yeah.
the math I've done seems like it's really expensive, and you can, I mean, companies give family coverage, you know, for less than $2,000 a head, and this seems like quite a bit more than $2,000 a head per month.
There may be different providers or something like
Right,
that.
well, maybe there's a different plan for me. I mean, again, we're getting into details here that we can talk about on Monday, but,
yeah, and our
Yeah.
goal will only be to say, drop the line item
Yeah.
by this.
that was my only
This much.
question, yeah.
How you obtain that may be
In 2
captured
weeks.
off of the ballot.
Well, so let me just read what the charter says, because I think, let's take it from on high, what the job that's being asked here, because that may help some, may not. Budget review process, section 5, it says, the budget committee may meet upon completion of the proposed budget prepared by the town manager in order to review and to make recommendations concerning such budget. Prior to the adoption of a final budget by the select board to be included in the annual town meeting warrant, the budget committee may meet and communicate to the select board recommendations it has concerning such final budget. For inclusion of recommendations in the annual town meeting warrant, the budget committee shall meet prior to the release of the town manager's proposed budget to elect officers. Committee votes on any recommendations on the budget must be received no less than 72 hours prior to the select board's approval of the budget, which obviously if you meet Monday, you have plenty of time to do that. But it seems the section, that those first two sentences are the ones that really strike to the heart of what is being asked of this group. They may meet in order to review and make recommendations on the budget, and for the inclusion of those recommendations on the annual town meeting warrant, the budget committee may meet and communicate to the select board those recommendations.
Yeah.
So that's
Delightfully broad language.
right there, right there.
Which budget year are they talking about? A year from now?
That budget, I think specifically.
I think it's this
But it
year.
is- but
Let's
it-
hope it's this year.
Yeah, I mean, that can be interpreted to say broad guidance recommendations, here's where you think it could be this instead of this. I get that it does need to say this is the line that needs to change, but I read that to say that there's broader guidance to give to the select board.
I think, so you're a standing body of the town, right? You're elected, you're here. I think that there's, the trick that I want to be clear about in terms of the role is that what's most important, yes, there's the dialogue between the select board and the budget committee, right? And those are probably the things that have the legs that go beyond what we're talking about really in this budget in the next, 2 weeks. But the other part of the job, and I think honestly, I believe probably the more important job is those little recommendations that go on the ballot, because that is actually what you're the voice of the you're the voice of the voter, you're the voice of the taxpayer. And I think that it may seem inconsequential because it can seem dry and very staid, but that's the work that goes into budget making, pro or con, right? Is it 5,000? Is it 50,000? You've been through this process. You've heard what's good and what's bad. Those are as a voter, those things are important to see, I think. So I understand your point, Steve, of there's a bigger conversation to be had here, and Walker, I mean, there's places where you think there's some hay to be made of sorts. I think that there's almost, you can go operate on two tracks, right? You can operate on two tracks in saying, on the one hand, we're a group of people who've elected to be able to do these things. On the other hand, this is the very narrow window which we're working within with a budget being what it is. I think you can live in both worlds and do that. I think there's nothing in here that seems contrary to those points. Yeah.
Well, but what I was hearing is that potentially the budget committee may come back on Monday and say, I've got the police department budget up here. Reduce police department health insurance to 200,000 instead of the 317 that's here.
Yeah.
Well,
that would have an impact with our employees.
Yeah. Well, I'm just raising. That's what I want to see.
I don't think Walker suggested that.
Okay, I wasn't sure.
Yeah. No, that is, it's a little tedious to have to say every, line whatever for every health insurance item throughout all departments. But if that's what it takes, yeah, that is what I'd be proposing, not that number necessarily. Certainly if you're talking about a mid-year change, I wouldn't, we're not going to save that much money in 1 year.
Yeah, no, but you would pick a number.
That's what I'm saying, yes, set a new target. Okay, well, me as a resident member of the budget committee, I don't think that's a reasonable expense, say. Right, yeah. And I think I know you can do it for less somehow or another. So I'm setting a new goalpost. Yeah. Is sort of what I'm proposing. And this has to pass our budget committee, then it has to pass your committee. So if we can't convince you, then that's that's what it is.
But it's all the same mechanism of if I thought Jason should spend less on chainsaws and tools, then you would say, drop your line item by this much. Just because it's millions of dollars in health insurance doesn't mean the mechanism's any different. You still say, we want to drop that line item by this much, and how that department gets there might be, overall, where it's something like health insurance and it goes to all the different departments, you could still pick the overall line item and drop that by whatever percentage relative to every single department. All the line items are all the same number in every department. So if you said 2,600 or whatever number insurance is.
But there is a considerable difference, gentlemen, in not buying. Not only on scale of money, not buying 5 cruisers, let's say, somewhat equal to money, and going into a process that has so many different tentacles into the what the employees expected, and if Walker can come up with family plans, with equal plans, peddle it to all the rest of the people in Maine too, because that would be fabulous.
I don't think equal plans would be the point. It's finding ways to scrape. Honestly, you can, not for everybody, but you can save a lot of money. Some people don't even realize they have a gold plan and they never go to the doctor. You can save money on health insurance. And I'm not advocating that this is a great health system that we have in this country at all. There's a lot of problems, for sure. But I do know what is fairly market, at least in the private sector.
The most important role is what gets communicated to voters. And I think of it like, they go in to see the ballot, I want them to see some flashing yellow lights, because we have some substantial budget challenges. The budget is growing by double-digit percentages, 4 years in a row. It used to go up 5% a year, 4% a year. It's now 11%, 16%. I mean, the curve is like this, and the town has to, in my mind, better understand that. So I think the discussion I would like to have on Monday is, how do we signal to the town that they've got some, that this is the plane we're on here.
And is the goal to have the voters reject the budget, or just?
Some of that might be that, our goal is too pro, as John would say. We are gonna make recommendations for the budget, but then also professionally suggest outside of the, budget, just the budget itself, to the select board in written form.
Yeah, a letter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're not trying to hang anyone up to dry. I mean, we don't want to take health insurance away, but I don't want to. But like I said, that seems like something that would be probably one of the least impactful ways to save meaningful money. I mean, the budget committee recommendations last year netted to $30,000, right, on a $11 million budget. Not.
I mean, what showed up?
And it doesn't say what it is. It just says you're right.
Well,
right.
because there were adjustments made in the court.
Sure.
Like, we didn't really make any adjustments, but usually the budget committee's already cutting stuff through this process that we just finished, which.
So,
Okay, well, one of the problems we face, if you're talking about employees, is we have union contracts, and the MMA is the one that has suggested the health insurance, they're the ones that say, so we need to look into that. Our employees expect certain benefits, that's when they came here and got hired. And frankly, my personal opinion in the 12 years I've been on the budget committee is we don't touch the salaries and the benefits, period. The employees
Which
are
doesn't
the
mean we can't
backbone.
work on that for next
Right,
budget season.
but
we
those are the
don't-
backbone of this town, and we owe them what they were promised when they were hired.
I'm not
But-
talking about breaking promises.
I've shopped insurance many, many times. There's no reason that you can't shop the insurance for the similar coverage that you might be able to get less, that might cost less.
Is the fact that it's the municipal association thing, for the insurance, are they providers?
Yeah.
Is it
Yeah,
like
to the towns.
the best, generally, the best pricing?
Yes. Yeah.
Because if we would
And the
know,
most
if we
stable.
knew the background a little bit,
Right.
like, we've looked at these 10 companies before, and this has proven to be the best for us over the last 20 years.
Does MMA self-insure?
Yeah, we're a pool.
Right.
So, and let me say this, and I don't wanna, any good idea is worth listening to, okay? So, I respect the thoughts that, I would agree with Steve that this is not a sustainable trend, to continue to move in the direction we have with increases. I would also say the egg prices are not something that I hope are sustainable, and we're gonna pay $24 a carton for them in a couple of years. But that's what we've seen. We've seen what housing prices have done over the last 4 or 5 years. We have lived in a different world over the last period of time than we saw previously to that. So that's real, it happened, we went through it. I think we're on the other side of something. I don't know what that means. I don't know what that does to egg prices. I don't know what it does to orange juice prices. But what I do know is that our breakfasts are expensive, right? No doubt. But to go to this issue of the package and benefits and salary, it needs to be said now, and I think Helen sort of mentioned it. The balance that someone goes into to join the world of municipal employment is not one that expects bonuses, that expects large increases in salary, that expects profit sharing. We don't do profit sharing, as you all well know. What we do is we provide a steady cadre of benefits.
Stability.
Health insurance, PTO, and it's a benefit-heavy compensation I won't say poor, but certainly not rich package.
A lot of these people are
And
making
that's,
60,000 a year.
yeah, that's the balance that people are taking to get into this line of work. And now, I would certainly agree that we can always look, and we should look, and I think Megan outlined quickly where that pool is going and where they are moving to try to help all these municipalities, because the vast majority of municipalities are part of that pool. They're all feeling the same pain we are in terms of those increases. But there's somewhat of a surprise that we've been through this, and I don't really, having gone through these budgets over the last few years, we know exactly what's happened. We all lived through this, and we lived through a time when we couldn't find people to hire. We lived through a time when we had 3 openings in Public Works. We lived through a time when we couldn't find people in the police department, and we had to go through steps as a town and as management to make sure that we provide service, and that's what we had to do. Now, I think we're on the other side of things. I think there's an end to that conversation. But if the budget committee recommends substantial changes to that benefit package, it will have ripple effects through the employees of this town. And I'm not saying that as a threat, I'm just saying that as a fact. I know the conversation tomorrow morning when I go in the office will be, what are they trying to do? This is a Jenga tower that we don't want to pull bricks from. We've got a good group of people. They're working hard for us. They're doing great work. And I don't think it's irresponsible in any way to look at what we're doing and see if we can do it better. So I think that's
I'm saying.
I like what you're saying.
No discredit or wanting,
Right.
lack of appreciation
And we
whatsoever.
want to look at that.
Absolutely, and I
Just looking
respect
for every way we can save money.
and I respect the curve and stopping that curve of continuing. I think there are many smart people in this room who all want the same thing. How we get there may be a little different, but I think we all want the same thing. But I just want everyone to be somewhat cautious and understand that what's said here does impact, and it will be something that will be, whether there's a vote 5-4 or 6-3 or what have you. These are things that our employees will hear, and they take into themselves. So I want that just on the table. I'm not saying as a threat. I'm just saying as factually. And I'm willing to work with anybody here to try to get the cost down and bend that curve. I don't know if that's the phrase you want to use, but if that's what we want to talk about, bending the curve, I'm glad to work with anybody. I know Megan's glad to work with anybody to do that in a thoughtful way, so.
Were people talking about making these changes for this ballot?
That's what I thought Walker was
Yeah.
saying.
Well, I mean, it probably wouldn't be the whole thing, but we still have a discussion, like I said, we still have to convince the budget committee and the select board, so,
And keep in mind, we're not, the changes that we are recommending are not necessarily physical changes. It's just changes to this paper budget.
This line, this line.
Change these numbers.
Correct.
That doesn't mean
Yeah.
cut employee salaries.
No.
That
So
just
here's
means
what I'm
change
getting
this
at.
number.
Can't we just go through this budget, change this line, change this line, change this line, send it to you guys, and then sometime in June, maybe July, meet again and start to look at these larger issues.
The other thing that might help to expedite, because Monday could be a very long one if we're talking both strategy, strategy and the specifics, as you're saying, is just to think of it as 2 documents. Think of it as a document for June, or a document that could be ready before that opens the discussion, take it to the media, put it on Facebook and have 300 replies. And have that be a longer term thing, because there's a lot of talent in this room and there's a lot of different perspectives. But then Monday, serve both of those masters, serve the other very much shorter thing is this line or this department we'd like to see modified by X. But I think if we go into Monday saying, giving ourselves permission to, write this, what becomes a communique to the town, that will allow us to get through Monday before it turns into Tuesday.
Yeah. I mean,
I know I get more and more coherent as the evening goes on.
If we, the first goal of Monday is to make recommendations to this exact budget. If we have time, how much time we want to take past that to discuss the bigger picture might be usable and everyone runs out of steam at 10 o'clock. But I think now that we have as many people as we do, this meetings like this should carry on, and now maybe the chair needs a little more energy to be able to set up meetings outside of what's already been scheduled. So especially after, do we have new committee member votes on the June ballot?
Yeah. Yep.
So we'll have new members, so we should meet in July.
Yep.
Vote in our new board.
Yeah.
Get them up to speed, get the new members up to speed, and then have these bigger talks,
Yeah.
A, amongst ourselves, and then B, maybe with the select board.
So it's removed from the current budget and all that. People won't get worked up.
Yeah,
And then,
right.
work over the
I
summer,
mean, we
the
need
fall.
to, I wouldn't say ease back into it, but we at least need to get the committee back into a point where we can sustain. I mean, last year, we almost didn't even have a committee. John tried to
Yeah,
stand back
but
us.
it'd be good because, it gives the budget committee some time to think about larger issues without the pressure of, next Tuesday, we gotta do this, then we
Yeah,
gotta
right.
do this. Let's give us some time for us to all just talk,
And
where
it's-
could we cut?
Yeah, and there's gonna be less public eye on you at that point
Yeah,
too, because
sure.
right now, the public's expecting the budget committee,
Yeah.
could be
Right.
expecting the budget committee to magically cut $1 million
Well, the
somewhere that
employees are definitely watching.
there's nowhere.
Well,
which isn't what's being proposed to be.
Right, yeah, for sure, for sure. I mean, I think when we get there Monday night, it's gonna be far less radical than anyone's imagining right now. But,
Quick question,
I don't know why it's not working.
is
Yeah.
what we're talking about with the budget committee, looking at the bigger pictures, is any of that already looked at? Like, I don't know if the finance director
I don't have a
has practice reviews different like contracts, see if we can get better contracts. I don't know the position, or if there's somebody, like does John, when you're looking at electricity suppliers or whatever,
So are you,
car dealers
Okay,
that have shop,
are you asking, like, do we shop what we purchase, or?
Yeah, basically, like,
Yeah,
is
I
that
mean-
kind of built into the day-to-day
Yes.
operation?
Yes,
Sure,
yes.
So
it's-
you're already.
Put out to bid what we're buying.
No doubt
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah, I think, but what also occurs is our process when we have, again, you've had your process here. This process, Meg and I were working on, at least going through these budgets, was 2 months ago. And so there's a list that we have, whether it's Trio or others, of things that we think can make, substantial change here. Which isn't to say that, I think the ideas that we've talked about here tonight or previously tonight are bad. It's a question of, this is something we need to do. That's where the salary survey came from. That's where the renewed personnel policy came from 3 years ago. Like, there are issues, structural issues in how we operate and how we manage this entity that are obvious, particularly as we go through our part of that process of getting this point to a drafted budget. So there's our list. There's, the board has your list of things that you want to see, and obviously you're the ones that tell me what needs to happen. And of course, part of that is input from the community and boards and yeah, right. So it's all part of that. But I guess my point is to you, Michael, is that there are already things at play and at work that need to happen, and that we're already sort of working on independent of this process.
I kind of assumed that was the
Yeah.
whole case.
Yeah.
I thought I'd bring it up because maybe that would calm.
But
I
this
don't
is
want anyone thinking that, we needed a fire truck, we go to the fire truck store to buy whatever they tell us to buy.
But to get to this budget, right, there are 1,000 other conversations that are had that don't even get brought up here, right? And that's, you know, obviously we highlight the big ones are the ones that do, but there are things that aren't part of that line item that, you know, that really, we could have a broader conversation, but there's other things that aren't in here, you know?
And I mean, totally respect the ton of work. I mean, it's clear just a staggering amount of work went into this.
Yeah.
But the reason you have a budget committee is so you have a fresh pair of eyes from the community who come in and say, we've gone from 28 full-time employees in FY22 to 43 full-time employees in 4 years.
Yep.
And the personal services line has gone from $1.9 million to $4.1 million in 4 years.
Right.
The budget committee would be, this is what I would say to the folks in the town employees, the budget committee would be irresponsible if it didn't take time to see if that is sustainable.
Oh, sure.
The same thing we've said about sustainability the last few meetings.
Sure.
That we can't keep doing this. So I don't want anybody to freak out. I want people to start writing their resumes and like, I don't want any of that.
I know.
But this is a staggering increase in costs, and I've heard good rationales for a lot of it over the last couple of weeks. I think a lot of really good decisions have been made. But this is not sustainable.
No.
And so some combination of giving some recommendations around pieces in here, plus the long-term thing Clay's talking about, that's where we've got to go. But I don't, you know, you shouldn't take offense that we're like going through this.
No.
And we respect that process, but
right.
The purpose of the budget committee is to go, wait, what?
No, my only point is that there's a whole nother set of machinery. There's you know, the Wizard of Oz is behind the curtain.
Yes.
You know, and there's not really much to see, to be honest with you. But there are steps and there are processes, and we talk about steps, talk about union contracts, there's a number of things we haven't really talked about here that have really, I wouldn't say talked out, but we have a direction that, like, there's some places we can make steps and make progress to be able to bend the curve of sorts, if that's the phrase we're going to use, works. You know, I don't think, and I think we can do that in a way that doesn't cause heartburn to our employees, right? The fear an employee has is, what do they know about my circumstance? Exactly. And I think I think all involved can have a very rational conversation about what that means and do that in a fair way, you know?
I want to follow up on what Steve said, though. The one thing that for me with this process has been very disappointing is that 6 years ago, I was on the select board for 3 years, and I went through 3 budget processes. Then I was away for a while, and now I'm back. And it kind of brings to me, with the very first meeting or the second meeting, I guess, when you said, when people do the same thing over and over and over again, and they expect a different result, that's the definition of insanity.
That's right.
Well, as I've sat here now, it's the same as it was 6 years ago. The town manager comes out and he says, budget committee, we have a terrible year this year. Everything's gone up, and it's just terrible. We're going to have to do something. Then the budget committee comes on stage, and the budget committee says, oh my gosh, town manager, this is a terrible budget. It's going up so much. We need to look into, you know, why paper clips are up 30%, why diesel fuel is up 25%. And we keep doing the same thing every year, and it keeps going up and up and up. And so something's going to have to fundamentally change in how we do business if this is going to be sustainable. Because every year it's the same.
I've done this 20 times, and that's exactly how it's worked. When Jeff and I sat here 20 years ago on the other side of this dais, that was exactly the way it worked then too, and it works that way in every municipality, everywhere you go.
Well, but that doesn't mean that you don't hear things.
Of course
in
not.
the course of this process.
Of course
that the
not.
select board or others in the town actually change and improve.
That's right.
Now, it's not a line item in this budget that says we've changed this, we're doing this more efficiently, we're providing this better service. But look at Orion's grant numbers. I mean, that was a deliberate decision by the select board to hire a full-time planner who could spend time getting those grants. And yes, there's a cost for that. That include, our salaries went up because of that. But those are the kinds of decisions, that's why
That's right.
I appreciate the hard work and the challenge to all of us to find things in this particular budget that we can cut. But there have been some I've been taking notes. Select board, we'd love to hear more from the budget committee. I love the idea of the budget committee being more engaged throughout the year to help us work on some of these bigger picture issues that.
Because what's gonna happen one of these years is the townspeople are gonna vote down a budget.
Could be this year.
Could be this year, you're right. And, it's sort of like what happened with the school. And, then what are you gonna do?
Yeah. Well,
Happy note to end on.
yeah.
I think in general, people are worried about their taxes, they're worried about the reval, but it's
What's our mill rate gonna be? Do we know yet?
We don't
I don't think
know.
Carrie set that yet.
No, we don't have it yet. It's the last thing he does.
Determine it when the budget passes.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
All right, well, I think we're done. Thank you for all your time, and we'll, yes.
Yes.
I didn't really mean for that,
Me
my
too.
one question to
Ah.
stop 20 minutes of argument.
Sure you did.
Sorry about that.
Yeah,
No, that was
starting in
good
like
discussion.